We had to like this, we're gonna go.
Good evening, everyone. I would like to call to order and welcome you to the Hampton-Wilbraham Regional School District School Committee meeting. It is 6:30 p.m. I see that David Sanders from Wilbraham Public Access Channel is recording. Is there anyone else here recording this meeting? Okay. We will begin with roll call in alphabetical order. Bill Bontempi. Cheryl Caruana. Here. Sean Kennedy.
Here.
Patrick Keenan.
Present.
Lisa Murray. Here. Maura Ryan. Here. Michelle Boudreau. Here. If you would please stand. Maura will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I would like to add that we do have our two elected officials beginning July 1st. We have Richard Rediker of Hampton, our new school committee member for Hampton, at the table, and then Mike Terabasi here is from Wilbraham. So with that, I'd also like to quickly acknowledge we have two school committee members that will not be returning after this, after their term finishes. We have Patrick Kiernan and Maura Ryan. So we have these gifts for you. All the luck, and we hope that you continue to participate.
Oh, I'm going to come up on
Okay. So we will begin with old business. We will begin with a Mass Insight Equity Audit presentation. Turn that over to you, John.
Sure, and I see that our team is ready to go. So I will just wait for Aaron to give us the thumbs up, and I will turn it over to Dr. Carmen Thomas Brown, who I've gotten to know quite well over the course of the past several months. She's been an excellent partner in this work, and she has some very interesting information to share tonight.
Thank you. All right, can you hear us okay?
Yes, we're all set.
All right, excellent. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Equity Audit presentation of the Hampton-Wilbraham Regional School District. Before we begin, we want to take a moment and introduce ourselves and Mass Insight. We are the Mass Insight Equity Audit team that conducted your equity audit. Mass Insight is a nonprofit committed to advancing equity and opportunity. We bring experience conducting multiple equity and community-centered review and planning processes in Massachusetts and nationwide, and we're excited to partner with Hampton-Wilbraham to engage in this work with you. I am Dr. Carmen Thomas Brown, and I'm an engagement manager at Mass Insight. I'd like to invite the team to briefly come off mute and introduce themselves as well. We'll start with Krista.
Hi everyone, I'm Krista Reed and I am the analyst who was working on the project, and I had the pleasure of being on site to conduct stakeholder focus groups and interview. And to Destiny, sorry.
Hey everyone, I'm Destiny Chantel Woodbury. I am a consultant and I worked on this equity audit as well.
Hello everyone, my name is Emma Milliken and I was the project coordinator on this project.
All right, thank you, team. So our goals for this presentation are to build a shared understanding of the equity audit purpose and the process, to present and gather your reflections around our findings and recommendations, and to support you in your role to further equity in Hampton-Wilbraham. Also, our goals are to re-ground in the purpose and the process. We will present our findings and ultimately support you in furthering your equity and inclusion for all. We kindly ask that you hold all of your questions until the end of the presentation. It may be helpful to jot your questions down as we go along, and we will do our best to thoroughly address your questions at the end of the presentation. So Mass Insight sees equity as a journey and not a destination. We believe this is ongoing work, and we commend Hampton Wilbraham for committing to its equity journey. You will see this belief show up in our presentation of findings, where we identify both strengths to build from and opportunities to improve. Again, I want to acknowledge that your district has a lot of strengths that we can build on to make your district more equitable for all students and stakeholders. We also want to take a moment to norm on the terms that we often use in our presentation. You will see these definitions on the slide in front of you. There are our first three, so please take a moment to briefly read over those. At the start of our work, we discussed key terminology, and we provided a few definitions that we use throughout the work. What you see here does not yet incorporate feedback, but we can still offer a shared language for our purposes today. I would like to point out two important notes, and the first is diversity, which is the middle term there, which is all about range and dimensions of difference in groups. So individuals themselves are not diverse just because they have different identity markers. Diversity just simply means difference. All right, we have three more definitions. Identity, stakeholder, and marginalized populations, which I would like to focus on marginalized populations and point out that they are groups that experience discrimination and or exclusion. When we use this term in our report and in our presentation, it's based on individuals who chose to self-identify. Mass Insight does not make assumptions about individual identities, and we do not require any participants to identify if they do not wish to do so. All right, so the purpose of the equity audit is to examine data and to understand the experiences and perceptions of stakeholders in order to identify the district's current strengths and opportunities for improvement that are relative to diversity, equity, and inclusion. So based on the findings, this audit will offer a set of recommendations to inform the development of a strategic plan for increasing equity and inclusion in your district. This slide shows the intentional process that we took over the past 6 months to engage in this equity audit. First, we spent time preparing for the audit and customizing our approach to best meet the Hampton Wilbraham context. So for example, we customized our process to suit your needs by eliminating staff and leadership focus groups and interviews, which we normally do in this process, but it's perfectly fine that you elected not to. Then we engaged in data and artifact review using publicly available data from DESE, as well as reviewing data and artifacts that were provided by the district and information that we found on your website. Then we engaged stakeholders in surveys, focus groups, and interviews to understand the lived experiences and the perspectives of those in the Hampton Wilbraham district community. And that included students, families, and caregivers. And then finally, we analyzed all of that information to identify the findings that we will present to you today. This is our district equity audit framework. Mass Insight examines equity through a 9-domain equity framework. We examine how equity or inequities play out within and across district systems. We will present the findings for each of the 9 domains. So for example, the equity, student access, and outcomes domain, which we will address very early in this presentation, it focuses on the presence and effectiveness of systems, such as multi-tier systems of support or MTSS. The family and community engagement domain focuses on authentic communication among the district students, families, and community partners. And the student readiness to learn domain focuses on the extent to which all students experience the kind of inclusive learning environment that is needed to fully engage in learning. As mentioned earlier, findings are grounded in significant stakeholder engagement through surveys and focus groups. shows survey participation by stakeholder group. We also offer family surveys in 4 total languages to offer greater access. Please note that all middle and high school students, school leaders, families, caregivers, district level staff, school committee members, and community members were invited to participate in surveys. Also note that only one family survey was completed in a language other than English, and that was Spanish. All students and families and caregivers were invited to participate in focus groups. All focus groups were conducted on site at the schools, and the family and caregiver focus groups were conducted both in person and virtually. Some of the virtual focus groups were conducted during the evenings and on weekends to maximize participation and accommodate schedules. We share this slide to name that the findings from the audit are identified through extensive analysis, synthesis, and triangulation of data and the information gathered throughout the process. By the way, I absolutely want to acknowledge that Dr. Provost did an amazing job of meeting our requests, and he presented over 350 pieces of data and artifacts to us. Findings represent themes and commonalities that surface across multiple sources of data and multiple focus groups or surveys. So please note the quotes that we share in our presentation today represent the sentiments shared by many stakeholders and those that were reinforced through multiple data sources. So we're excited to transition to the presentation of the findings. Again, because we see equity as a journey, findings include both strengths and opportunities for improvement. We define strengths as areas of momentum or work that you've already started and or investments that you can build from. Opportunities for improvement are the challenges and areas where more work is needed to fully implement or reach impact. Findings are presented for each of the 9 domains. So for the purposes of today's presentation, we will move through relatively quickly, but again, we're happy to take questions at the end, and there is a more detailed written report, which is in fact quite extensive. We know that many of these findings may be difficult to sit with and to digest, and yet we know that this is a necessary part of continuing an equity journey. Some of the findings may give you pause or a wondering or even an aha moment, but this is all completely normal and it is expected. So now to kick us off, I would like to pass it to Destiny to give us the findings of the first domain.
Thank you, Carmen. All right, everyone. Hello. Happy evening. We're going to start with our first domain. The vision, strategy, and culture domain speaks to how the district's vision, mission, and strategic plan create the conditions for an equitable organizational culture. For the first finding in the vision, strategy, and culture domain, the district administration has intentionally created a culture aligned with its vision and mission. So the district contracted with Massachusetts Association of Regional School Consulting Group to facilitate a strategic planning process. The project involved 4 phases, including collecting data from stakeholders, updating the vision and mission and core value statements, and drafting strategic goals for the district. The consultants worked with the steering committee composed of teachers, parents, students, administrators, town officials, and community members, and the data that was collected involved SWOT meetings and comprehensive surveys. The steering committee reviewed the data and identified themes for the district's improvement goals, and the committee also approved the new vision, mission, and core value statements and settled on 5 themes for the strategic plan. Y'all, this is a strength. Okay, I really want to stamp this. You have so many different stakeholders that were a part of this process to make sure that you have a strong vision, you have a strong mission. However, the perception of various stakeholders indicate that there is not yet full alignment of the district's culture and the developed vision and mission as it connects to becoming more equitable. As you can see on the graph on the left, when surveyed across the district and community, the results indicated that there's a strong amount of understanding from those working in the district and a moderate amount of understanding from families on the reason that the district is focused on becoming more equitable. Although staff largely agreed on the understanding of the reasons for were becoming more equitable, staff at the school level were more varied in their perception of whether a common understanding of equity is shared across the district. There's two quotes that I want to highlight. Both of them are from school staff. One says, although there have been some improvements since I began working in the district, I believe the district definitely needs to work on this equity issue. And the second quote says, I think equity is a goal for all educators, which we strive for all the time. There are going to be things we do well at one moment in time and poorly at another time. I think all educators are trying to be equitable. For the second finding in the vision and culture and strategy domain, the district strategic plan contains data-driven and student-centered strategic objectives, priorities, and outcomes. However, there is a larger awareness in the district when it comes to families and caregivers. So, the current 2022 to 2027 district strategic plan outlines a clear connection from the mission, the values, the vision to each of them in strategic objectives, strategic priorities, and data-driven outcomes. The areas of focus were divided into 5 main domain and themes, so the culture, climate culture, curriculum, climate culture, student support and student success, communication and leadership. Within each of these domains and themes, there were strategic objectives that were aligned to action step baseline data, timelines, measurement outcomes, and resources. In the equity audit survey, stakeholders were asked to weigh in on their awareness of the district's strategic priorities to improve the schools and students' experiences. The graph on the slide indicates that there is a full awareness and knowledge with the school committee, but significant less awareness with families and caregivers. For example, 100% of the school committee completely agree, and only 34% of the family caregivers completely agree, and 46% somewhat agree, which may raise a concern about the methods of communication on the priorities. Though the district's SIP does not specifically call out marginalized student populations besides multilingual learners, there's a repeated commitment to educate, challenge, and support all students to achieve success. These living foundational documents show the district's intention to work towards greater equity. One school committee members stated, we have a strategic plan and school improvement plans. Another school committee member named, I am kept informed as to the progress of the strategic plan during its development and have appreciated the way in which administration is using the plan to promote many avenues of improvement to our district. These statements further support the fact that the strategic plan and the school improvement plans are active living documents in the district. All right, I'm now going to pass it to Krista.
Thank you, Destiny. In this domain, we examine the extent to which the district's policies, practices, and mindsets reflect a commitment to equity, as evidenced by the use of disaggregated data and multi-tiered systems of support to produce resulting actions that focus on decreasing any existing disparities between subgroups of students and continuing to ensure equitable access, success, and increasingly comparable outcomes for all students. So, to begin, the district has repeatedly committed to systematically using district and school level data that is disaggregated to inform decision-making and achieve greater equity. We mentioned the strength of the strategic planning process earlier. However, we want to point out that the current strategic plan and school improvement plans do not explicitly reference any disaggregated student level data. So the measures of success in those plans heavily focus on the inputs, what we will do, rather than on the intended outcomes at the student level, what we hope to achieve. This means that district decision-making about the extent to which those strategic actions are in fact arriving at more increased equity is not going to be driven by data about specific subgroups of students. Additionally, when school staff were asked about whether they have the opportunity to collaboratively monitor disaggregated data, so we're talking at the classroom and school level, more than 1/3 disagreed or somewhat disagreed. Dr. Provost has taken them to consistently provide reports that include a wide variety of disaggregated data for marginalized students and and for all students. Though the vast majority of school leaders express that they have access to data that they need to inform decisions, between 10% and 1/3 of teachers, depending on the school that they work at, did not agree that they had access to the necessary disaggregated data to inform classroom decisions. Staff explained that there is a mixture of factors that contribute to that. Some is a lack of access to the data, some is a lack of dedicated time to make decisions from that data. Some suggested that there's an inadequate focus on the instructional implications of their analysis. So the district's current suite of universal screeners, for example, are not yet able to be disaggregated by all of the areas named in your equity policy, which means that teachers, school leaders, and district staff can't yet determine regularly to what extent certain groups of students are responding to instruction and regularly respond to that for groups of students. When staff were surveyed about whether the district focuses on ensuring equitable student success, access, and outcomes, which is what you'll see on the screen, on the right side of the screen, nearly 1/4 of school staff somewhat disagreed or were unsure. School leaders were even less likely to agree. 28% of school leaders somewhat disagreed with the statement, the district focuses on ensuring equitable student access, success, and outcomes. Our second finding in this area is that not all students have equal awareness of or access to opportunities within the district. The areas of access and outcome that we examined broadly in this section include what you see at the top of the screen, from attendance to advanced course participation to other types of coursework, after school and extracurricular activities and fees. So I want to highlight some facts in all of those areas for you. So rates of chronic absenteeism have increased for all groups of students in the district, and low-income students currently have the highest rate of chronic absenteeism at 31.7%. They also happen to be their largest subgroup of high-need students. There is no strategic priority or action step related to attendance in the district's current strategic plan or in any of the existing school improvement plans. The district's overall rate of advanced course participation has dropped to a 4-year low in 2022. It stands at 65.8%, and there are major differences in participation rates for students with disabilities, particularly for males when compared to females, and for different racial and ethnic groups of students. The district is beginning to address barriers to student enrollment in career tech courses and focusing effort there. We want to name that as something that you're aware of and taking focused action on. Students express that after-school clubs and activities are places where they feel like they can be themselves, they feel welcome, included, and seen by their peers and by staff. Family members universally pretty much recognize this as a strength of the district, the amount of activities that there are for their students and how welcome their students feel when they're there. However, the district doesn't provide transportation every day of the week for students to stay after school, which hinders some students from being able to participate. Additionally, half the family members that were surveyed indicated that they were not aware of the district's fee waiver process, which fees and transportation were cited by students and families as reasons that they were unable to participate in those opportunities, extracurricular opportunities. Finding number 3, our analysis affirms the findings contained in the district's Student Opportunities Act Plan from 2021, which is that there are pervasive outcome gaps for students with disabilities, English language learners, and low-income students. The lived experience of those students and their families combined with this quantitative data indicate that the quality of support for these particular student populations warrants examination in order for the district to achieve greater educational equity. So, like we said, we affirm the findings in that plan, and we probe more deeply into the breadth and depth of the gaps identified for students with disabilities, English learners, and low-income students. The largest gaps in academic proficiency in the district and for graduation rates exist for students with disabilities. So you'll see an example of MCAS results, the gap between students with disabilities and their non-disabled peers on the left, and on the right, you'll see the last year's 4-year cohort graduation rates by subgroup, and you'll see that the largest difference is for students with disabilities. Furthermore, the largest gaps in math or completion rates in the district are observed between students with disabilities and their peers, and this gap is much wider than the gap we observe at the state level. Many students and family members shared with us during focus groups and in their open comments on our surveys that disabilities often make students the targets of bullying, and often students' unique learning needs are not fully supported by all of their teachers. Some family members expressed high levels of frustration, explaining that getting teachers to consistently provide the agreed upon accommodations and holding their children to high expectations felt like it could be a constant battle with certain teachers or administrators in the district. Students themselves expressed an awareness of lower expectations as young as middle school. One family member explained that autism awareness activities at their child's school were not planned with her child in mind, and as a result, she was doubtful that they would even get to experience that week of activity. So I want to read a couple of the quotes on the screen here. A student shared in their open responses on our equity audit survey when we asked them, how could your district improve? They said, get rid of the SEDS. When a parent was speaking in a focus group, they shared that their child was on a tour, moving up to the next school level, and that one of the student ambassadors pointed to a room where students with disabilities received resource services and said, that's where all the stupid kids go. A student shared with us in their survey that sometimes a teacher doesn't follow their IEP, but for the most part they do. And a middle school student shared with us in a focus group that they call you dumb for being in there, and the special ed teachers give you all the answers. Teachers don't act like they believe in you, so they just make it easier. I know that special ed teachers and administrators are working incredibly hard for students every day, but the lived experience of students with disabilities points to a need for some examination in this district. I want to discuss the next subgroup of students, which are English language learners, or ELs. The percentage of ELs making progress on the access exam has increased from 2018 to 2022. And while the percentage of students attaining proficiency has been steadily declining, in 2022 there was a dramatic increase from 6% up to 28%. Despite this increase, there are still major gaps that exist between the rates of proficiency for ELs and former ELs on MCAS in both subject areas. And additionally, ELs had the highest increase in their chronic absenteeism last year. So from 2021 to 2022, their rate of chronic absenteeism increased from 13%, 13.5% to 28.2%. So that was the subgroup that had the largest increase. They are not the subgroup that has the highest rate of chronic absenteeism, but they saw the largest increase, kind of in that post-virtual COVID return to school time. 10th grade MCAS scores, graduation, and math score completion rates for EL are not publicly available because those low cohort numbers lead to suppression from DESE. And so those areas are not addressed specifically in our report, but I just want to say clearly here with you today that those outcomes are incredibly important and worthy of examination, no matter how small that cohort of students is. It's really important that the district examine those outcomes, even though in terms of publicly available data, we were not able to. Moving on to that third subgroup of students, which are low-income students, they are the largest of the three subgroups named in your district's plan, and they account for nearly 22% of the student population of the district. As overall rates of proficiency have declined across the district in both ELA and math, the gaps between low-income students and their peers have persisted. I want to point out that in this section of the report, we also call out differences in outcomes for students outside of those two groups. So for different racial and ethnic groups, as well as differences observed by gender, there are pervasive outcome gaps observed in both ELA and math across grade levels for several groups of students. We also looked at gender differences. Females outperform males in ELA, and then this has been inverse for math, males outperforming females. We also see stark differences in math score completion rates, with gaps larger than what we observe at the state level. Females with higher math score completion rates than males. And there also appears to be an increasing bifurcation, split in those dropout rates. It is becoming increasingly males that are dropping out of the district. To date, most of the district's efforts related to MTSS, or what we call multi-tiered system of support, have focused on tier 1. So our finding in number 4 is that the district has named the development of multi-tiered systems of support as an area of focus within the strategic plan in order to improve its ability to proactively monitor and measure students' social, emotional, and academic needs. We believe this is important work. Much of that work has, like I said, focused on what we call core or tier 1 instruction, what are the universal supports for all students. Much of that work has been about adopting new curriculum, vertically aligning it, and ensuring that we are building out that universal screening that happens for all students across the district. And while staff agree that their schools do proactively identify students' social, emotional, academic, and developmental needs, in their open responses, staff noted that even in cases where student needs are identified through those screeners, those assessments, sometimes the school schedule does not allow for interventions to be delivered. There may be a lack of appropriate resources or aligned resources to the intervention that needs to take place for that student, or that there's a lack of trained staff that's preventing students from receiving those tiered interventions with fidelity. Some of the quotes on the right side of the screen highlight, the staff member said, we have intervention blocks. The teachers were not given training or resources to help them in those blocks. Special ed is often our only avenue of support. There needs to be some training for all faculty and staff in this area, investment in some research-based interventions, and providing support and follow-up on data. There are many breaks in the system that prevent students from accessing the support they need in a timely manner. And now I'm going to pass it to Carmen, who's going to elaborate on the findings in the next domain, which is student readiness to learn.
Thank you, Krista. The Student Readiness to Learn domain examines whether the district, with guidance from students and families, supports schools' implementation of policies, systems, and practices that create safe, welcoming, and inclusive classroom and school environments, as well as if the district and schools have evidence-based systems and practices to monitor and support students' social, emotional, engagement, mental health, and developmental needs. Our first finding in this domain is, despite the district's strategic plan of providing a more inclusive and respectful treatment of all students, staff, students continue to feel excluded and or unseen by the school community. The Hampton-Wilbraham strategic plan addresses 5 domains, and one of those domains is around climate and culture. The climate and culture domain contains elements that directly relate to respectful treatment, as well as culturally improved and inclusive practices for all students in school. Students' safety, well-being, feeling welcomed and included in the classroom and school environments all impact students' readiness to learn. On the student survey of this equity audit, students were asked what could be done at their school to make them feel more safe, included, supported, or like they belong. Many students stated that they do feel safe and included. When the data was disaggregated with regards to race, more white students affirmed that they felt safe, welcomed, and included. However, a pattern emerged from minoritized or marginalized students where they made comments on the equity audit around their negative experiences in school. Note some of the comments on the slide. For example, more diversity, more education about discrimination. The last one, I think many child could do a better job of making all races feel included in the school's environment. Again, those comments were directly from students. Also, one approach to inclusion for students in school is the diversification of the curriculum, resources, and materials for instruction. Diversification of instructional resources increases accessibility for every student, and it allows all students the opportunity to make connections with the material being taught. And those that are not directly connected have the chance to experience other cultures, which makes the learning environment richer for all students. We are aware of the effort by the PTO that we will speak to in the family and community engagement domain. In addition to the diversification of instructional resources is the acknowledgement of and respect for religious holidays and observances that may impact students' readiness to learn during certain times of year. So for example, one parent reminded us that my high schooler had pictures of major assignments scheduled on the Jewish holiday of Rosh Hashanah, which is really tough when it's the one day a year he had to miss for religious reasons. Also, one parent mentioned in a focus group that her family does not celebrate Halloween due to religious reasons, and there was not an alternative for her child except sitting in a gym alone. We would like to point out that when school leaders were asked a similar question on the equity audit, 100% of school leaders agreed or somewhat agreed that their school creates safe, welcoming, and inclusive environments. Finding number 2, district-wide policies around discipline lack consistency and accountability, which have impeded the ability to create a more inclusive school climate. On the equity audit survey, staff were asked which policies and practices needed to be re-examined. Special education was rated the highest, and the second highest rating was discipline. Dr. Provost also addressed disproportionality of discipline in his accountability report, and he acknowledged the position of the district. He also presented the data on the reduction in the percentage of students disciplined, which includes suspensions, expulsions, and emergency removals at the latest school committee meeting. He stated that there were 185 suspensions last year, which resulted in more than 650 missed instructional days. However, this year, there were 72 suspensions, which resulted in fewer than 300 days of missed instruction. So in lieu of exclusionary practices from school for poor behavior, the district is investigating restorative practices, such as community service for disciplinary infractions. This shows a very strong move in the right direction. In terms of having consequences for adverse behaviors, the vaping problem in school bathrooms was a major call out from students. Some students even expressed not desiring to use the restrooms due to this problem. So this is undoubtedly an area of investigation for accountability of the schools and consistency with correction so that all students may have a positive experience in school. Finding number 3. Students' experiences at school impact their readiness to learn. As stated earlier, a reasonable number of students claim to feel safe at school, as we indicated before. However, even some of the students that felt safe called out bullying as a large violation and problem at school. In the district, bullying affects students' feeling of safety, their feelings of security and belonging. The district's strategic plan has a goal to reduce the percentage of marginalized students disciplined or identified as incidents in incident reports, as identified as victims in incident reports. On the equity audit surveys, there was a concern by multiple stakeholders. Students called out bullying as a major issue, and some claims that there are incidents of adults being aware and not intervening. Dr. Provost also mentioned at a past school committee meeting that the current group of 8th graders are struggling with bullying and discriminatory harassment. We also found the bullying prevention and intervention plan, and we examined that, and the last noted revision was in 2018, and it is considered in place. The plan claims to have a trained crisis response team and student teacher assistance team in each school and at the district level. However, the problem of bullying continues, and it is significant. This brings into question the strength and the consistency of systems that are in place to handle such transgressions, because 81% of the students indicated that there are systems in place to handle bullying, discrimination, and harassment, but the effectiveness seems to be in question. Continuing with finding 3, when students were asked if they witnessed other people being treated badly or unfairly because of their race, ethnicity, gender, age, religion, physical appearance, or other characteristics, 57% of the students stated yes. When asked what was the reason reason for the unfair treatment that they witnessed, as you can see with the graph on the right. 72% stated that the person's appearance, 51% stated race, ethnicity, or nationality, and 45% stated sexual orientation, 42% stated a person's disability. So those are reasonably significant percentages. Now back to Krista.
Thank you, Carmen. In this domain, culturally and linguistically sustaining instruction, we examine the extent to which all students experience rigorous instruction that is culturally and linguistically sustaining. And by that, we mean one which validates their identities, their needs, and interests. I want to take this opportunity to define this just a little bit more precisely by pointing out that a culturally responsive environment is one where educators regularly leverage their ability to recognize students' cultural displays of learning and meaning-making, and respond positively and constructively, using students' cultural knowledge as a scaffold to connect what is being known to new concepts and content being taught. I want to start by acknowledging that the district has made a variety of commitments to explicitly providing this kind of instruction to better meet the needs of all students, which is a strong foundation from which to build. From the June 2020 resolution to anti-racism to various policies related to instructional materials and textbook selection, the district acknowledges the importance of providing these culturally responsive learning environments. It's important to note that neither the strategic plan nor the SIPs include any plans to explicitly develop teachers' knowledge or skills related to cultural responsiveness. There have been sporadic opportunities for staff to engage in conversations in those skills related to culturally responsive instruction, but it is not a district-wide coordinated effort that engages all staff consistently. At the high school, they're engaging in a book study of Dr. Soretta Hammond's work. They're implementing elements of universal design for learning, which are both strong efforts that will increase staff's knowledge and skills. And to be clear, the problem we just discussed around identity-based bullying and harassment is intricately tied to this area. If students are not seeing themselves positively portrayed in the classroom, in the curriculum, if their identities are not able to be shared in spaces led by adults, then their identity is then being targeted negatively by peers, and this contributes to students' lack of achievement and overall well-being in school. Finding number 2 is that teachers do not have adequate time or support to develop culturally and linguistically sustaining units, lessons, and metrics to measure content mastery. 1 in 5 staff survey respondents indicated that they do not have support to create culturally authentic and responsive learning environments. In their open responses, staff identified a variety of barriers or reasons they don't feel that they have support. One teacher said, "I don't know that the staff is 100% on board with providing an inclusive and culturally responsive curriculum. And I'm even less sure that they would be prepared to effectively do so, even if they wanted to." Many staff pointed to a lack of time to effectively design learning experiences for their students, which this quote from the teacher in the gray box exemplifies. Teachers everywhere across the country would love more time to create, adapt, and improve lessons, but unfortunately, across the board in all schools, 1 prep period per day is not enough to grade papers, provide feedback, communicate, collaborate, and redesign material. In a perfect world, the teacher's day would include more prep time. A lack of feedback is another way support is lacking for teachers. Nearly 1 in 4 staff members disagree or somewhat disagree that they've received feedback to improve and refine their instructional practice. Some staff explain that they do receive helpful feedback from administrators, but it can be infrequent, mostly occurring during the formal evaluation process. Others describe a lack of constructive feedback aimed at helping them improve, and still others describe experiences with feedback that have left them feeling punished, it felt highly punitive, and a culture where staff can't ask for support. Carmen will now continue with the next domain, which is family and community engagement.
Thanks, Krista. The family and community engagement domain examines whether the district has a vision for family and community engagement centered on inclusive approaches for communicating with families, the community, and partner organizations, as well as leveraging them as partners in furthering student success. Also, it determines whether family, community, and partner input and feedback is routinely sought in multiple and accessible ways. Finding number 1 in this domain states that the district has various forms of communication with stakeholders, and some stakeholders express a need for greater, more inclusive communication between the district families and community members. The district developed a multi-tiered communication and strategy plan to keep stakeholders informed and engaged in the learning community created for students. On the family survey, when asked if the district and school communication was accessible, the vast majority, 93%, agreed or somewhat agreed with the statement. Families reported the most common forms of communication from the district were email and phone calls. However, some families felt that there needs to be greater and more regular communication. The district should also be mindful to communicate through various modes so that all families have access to the information. This is especially important for marginalized populations. Continuing with finding number 1, approximately 70% of families agreed or strongly agreed with the district using their input and feedback to inform decisions. Even though the district's track record of communicating to families and caregivers is largely positive, the solicitation of feedback from stakeholders had a less favorable outcome. Again, considering that 68% of families and caregivers stated that the district or school routinely solicited their feedback, nearly 1/2 of the parent surveyed somewhat agreed that the district asks for and uses family input and feedback to measure its effectiveness. Addressing these types of concerns will aid in meeting the strategic objective of the communication domain that calls out building trust with all stakeholders. Finding number 2, there is evidence of partnerships between parent organizations and the school district, as well as resources on the district website specifically for families and caregivers to assist with student needs around mental health, well-being, safety, and belonging at school. There is evidence of several active partnerships, such as the PTO and CPAC. However, some families and students who receive special education complained of not being aware of all of the partnerships, such as CPAC, which CPAC has a plethora of resources to serve students with disabilities. Please note the fourth comment. The PTO has an active roster at each school, which also is quite positive. It was noted in a caregiver focus group that the PTO is assisting with initiatives around diversity, equity, and inclusion, such as diversifying the reading selections for students at schools. That's an excellent opportunity for schools and students. In an effort to provide support for students and families and caregivers, it was noted that on the district website, there is a link for families that includes multiple resources that directly impact students' mental health, well-being, safety, and belonging at school, such as the 2023 High School Youth Risk Behavior Survey and an online anonymous bullying prevention and intervention report form and prevention resources. This resource is definitely a solid start in attempting to address the bullying in the district. Also, it was positive to see a unity effort between Hampton and Wilbraham communities through a Facebook group that has a membership of about 331 members. All right, I will now pass it to Destiny, who will walk us through school instructional leadership.
Thank you, Carmen. All right, y'all, we're looking at domain 6. The school instructional leadership domain addresses the district support and conditions that enable principals to focus on and promote student learning. To do this, the voices of staff, students, and families are amplified to inform decisions and school priorities by understanding the extent to which schools are meeting the needs of all students. The finding for school instructional leadership domain states that the district provides various professional development training and opportunities for staff. Staff expresses a need and desire for ongoing and sustained professional development aligned with individual and school priorities. The district provides PD opportunities on topics such as gender identity, supporting transgender students in our schools, bullying, harassment, discrimination, and other topics. And in each session, there are opportunities for staff to collaborate. When reviewing the attendance of these sessions, there were district staff and school administrators. In addition to district-provided opportunities, the district offers ways for staff and leaders to attend professional learning outside of the district, such as credit course reimbursements, district-wide mentoring stipends. School leaders play a vital role in assisting their staff to enhance their professional practice. They provide support from district-provided professional development opportunities and establish formal and informal feedback systems. The district selects the focus of professional learning each year, and the school leaders actively engage in these sessions alongside the rest of the staff, and many instances take the lead in facilitating them themselves. However, there's a lack of ongoing and sustained professional learning for all staff. Some of the quotes that we're giving out from a district leader: not sure what professional learning opportunities are provided for all staff. A school leader said there's a lack of district-wide comprehensive plan. We're working on it, but many past professional learnings have been school by school. And the teacher says we're always filling our surveys about professional development. We say what we want and what we need. We feel our voices are not being heard. The next domain is domain 7, and it is talent development. The talent development domain examines whether or not the district has a non-discriminatory approach and plans to attract, recruit, hire, develop, and retain a highly diverse staff in all positions that is reflective of the student population, the community, and the increasingly diverse national population. Also, students and families are included in the hiring process. Targets for hiring diverse candidates are set, monitored, and reported throughout the hiring process. So for the first finding in the talent development domain, human resources structures have a foundational approach to recruiting, hiring, developing, and retaining a diverse workforce, yet there remain structural gaps in the process. So the Mass Insight team conducted analysis of the district recruitment, hiring, development, and retention structures to assess the emphasis placed on attracting diverse staff and providing ongoing professional development opportunities for all employees aligned with the district's values and needs. So based on the evidence from focus groups, interviews, surveys, and district data, it is evident that the district has prioritized enhancing a recruiting, hiring, and development processes to cultivate a diverse, skilled workforce, as it is reflected in the fiscal year 23 budget and discussions amongst district and school leaders. However, there are gaps between the desired outcomes and the actual results. Staff members have expressed a need for coherence and strategically aligned plans to effectively support the district's goal of fostering culturally diverse and highly qualified workforce. And the district currently relies on regional, local, and web-based recruitment fairs and other opportunities to attract domestic talent, emphasizing the district community and culture diversity. The district uses school spring to post open positions and has job positions listed on their district website. However, the information available for review on the district website, shared materials, and public resources do not provide comprehensive data on anecdotes regarding this approach. There is also no available data to assess the correlation between between local hiring and sufficient staffing for instructional and non-instructional positions. One strength of the district is the ability to retain staff members. So from staff tenure data provided by the district, out of 708 staff in the district, 117, that's 17%, have over 20 years of experience, and 128, 80% of staff have 10 to 19 years of experience. That's amazing. However, only 28% of the district's office agree that the district uses that data to retain and advance staff, and only 60% of school leaders agree. When surveyed, almost half, 51% of all school staff respondents disagree with or somewhat disagree with, or unsure about the statement that the district and schools monitor use evaluation data to retain and advance staff. And 60% of school leaders agree, and somewhat agree as well. So the takeaway here is that the staff are not perceiving the connection between district effort and retention of staff. Continuing with finding 1, the district uses the Massachusetts model system for educator evaluation rubric to evaluate the superintendent, district administrators, and school level administrators. And the district also has this teacher rubric that the school level administrators use to evaluate teachers. However, it is unclear on the frequency of the evaluation, how the data is being used, and is shared with those who are being evaluated. Additionally, many staff explain that the district does not collect data from the formal exit process that helps them respond to and improve the conditions of the workforce. Staff shared, one staff member shared that the staff that choose to leave should be given an exit interview. Staff that are disgruntled should be given a voice, and when they express complaints, those complaints should be addressed. I think our administration does an excellent job of offering support and encouragement, but if someone is upset at how they are being treated or supported, they are generally dismissed. The second finding for talent development domain is while the diversification of student population, teaching staff have been prioritized for student needs, particularly linguistic needs, the diversity among the teaching staff is not representative of the student population. Currently, the district's student population is 81.4% white, while 98.1% of staff is white. According to the survey feedback provided by district staff and school leaders, the prevalent sentiment among school leaders is that the existing hiring process does not yield qualified diverse candidates and align with the district's vision and commitment. While a large proportion of the school leaders compared to district leaders believe that these processes do not lead to candidates who share the same district values, a significant majority from both groups agree or strongly agree with this perspective. And now I'm going to go to the next slide and we'll look at some quotes from school staff, students, and family members. I'm going to pick some that I'm going to read out loud. A student said, "I want the school to be more diverse in terms of the teachers. All the teachers have always lived here and maybe went to this school. Show people there are differences in experience." A family member said, "Ensure my child sees faculty and staff that look like him, needing to diversify the workforce. Hire more teachers of color." Another staff member has said, "We only look at applications in which someone was connected to the school. If we only hire people because someone knew our principal and called us to ask that they are being given an interview, then we aren't looking for a bigger, diverse application pool." I'm now going to pass it off to Krista.
Thank you, Destiny. In the conditions domain, we attempt to understand the extent to which the district invests and aligns resources, from time to staffing to finances and programs that prioritize marginalized populations and ensure schools have the necessary flexibility with those resources to address their unique school needs. So we acknowledge, first of all, that the district's budget process can be complicated and particularly this year challenging. What we think is important to note is that district office staff, when we surveyed them, were more likely to agree than school leaders that projections of revenue and expenses are data informed and reliable. They are more likely to agree that the majority of funds follow students and prioritize marginalized students. 43% of school leaders did not believe that their school's budget is aligned with SIP or school improvement plan priorities to ensure access and success for all students. And 71% of school leaders somewhat disagree with the statement, my school's budget priorities reflect the needs of marginalized student populations. I think it's important to know this because undoubtedly the district is thinking about how to improve that budget process, and we believe there is room to improve both how informed and consulted school leaders are in the process. We see evidence that the budget process and therefore the final budget is increasingly aligned to these three criteria. That it prioritizes marginalized populations, that the majority of funds follow students, and that projections of revenue and expenses are data informed and reliable. We see evidence that is true, but it's important that leaders at all levels, from the district down to the school, are in close alignment with their perception of that, so that you can share in the messaging to your broader community about your improvements in the budget process. Finding number 2. The perception of the district office's support, coordination, and use of staff input and feedback vary widely among school leaders and school staff. We want to understand how district departments differentiate their support to align with specific school needs and help them prioritize marginalized populations, how they establish conditions for that flexibility, allowing schools to address what's unique about their school. This necessitates high levels of coordination and collaboration, as well as the regular use of feedback and input. There is a wide range of perceptions when it comes to the level of coordination from the district office. The majority of school leaders, so 57%, somewhat disagree that services and support are coordinated. So as shown above, 39% of school staff somewhat disagree that the district services and support are coordinated, and this clearly indicates a difference in perception based on position. The degree to which staff feel that their input and feedback matters also varies widely across the district. When school staff are surveyed, we ask them to agree with the statement, school leaders seek my input to inform decisions. Their answers to this, their level of agreement to this varied widely from school to school. The overall rate of staff who agreed or somewhat agreed was 70%. When you disaggregate by school, the rate ranged from 80% to as low as 62%. So staff do not always feel that their perspectives or expertise are genuinely thought and considered in decision making. So for example, school staff member shared, the decision for curriculum was made well before it was presented to staff. And then it made it seem that it was the staff that chose the curriculum. Our admin does not speak with us. Everyone lives in silos. I'm often left out of discussions where my expertise would assist in the situation. I often feel isolated from other staff within the building. In another one shared, we're asked for input occasionally, but our input is often disregarded. For finding 3, the district is beginning to transform from a culture of aggregate data users to a culture focused on analyzing and using disaggregated data of and for marginalized students to inform decision-making and resource allocation. The purpose of a coherent, equity-focused data management system is to create and sustain a district-wide culture using disaggregated data to diagnose and improve the achievement and performance and well-being of all students, especially students from marginalized populations. As we discussed throughout the presentation, the district's data management system has many components that need strengthening, from the way the student information system and the universal screener infrastructure communicate to data protocols and dedicated time for analysis and action planning for teachers. However, the district is beginning to transform from a culture of aggregate data to a culture of disaggregated data. District leaders and staff are beginning to develop their skills and capacity for analyzing and using data from different subgroups of students to identify and address the needs of those students. Through the data presentations, Dr. Provost consistently is using disaggregated data. He presented an analysis of 10 key success factors. Through his entry plan, he's begun a model for the school committee, for district leaders, for staff, for families, how to analyze and use disaggregated data to further equity in the district. School committee members praise Dr. Provost for his presentations that present disaggregated data for all student groups. And I'm going to pass it back to Carmen to wrap us out.
Thank you, Krista. And now for our final domain, which is governance. The governance domain examines whether the governing body prioritizes system-wide equity when exercising its policy-making responsibilities and holds its members and district leaders accountable for modeling and advancing a more equitable and inclusive district culture and success outcomes for all stakeholders. It also looks at whether the governing body routinely monitors disaggregated student, school, and district data, as well as implementation and impact data reflective of district strategic priorities. The first finding states that the school committee has prioritized system-wide equity in its policies, and there are opportunities to more deeply understand and monitor the extent to which policies are currently impacting practices in the district. In policy JPB, education equity is defined as providing all students as reasonably practical, high-quality instruction and support to reach and exceed a common standard. With this in mind, the school committee has approved policies that address inclusivity and equitable practices that relate to non-discrimination, sexual harassment, and bullying. This school year, there was a goal to support the district with the promotion of diversity, equity, and inclusion. At the December 1st, 2022 school committee meeting, the school committee and the superintendent initiated the superintendent's annual evaluation process. School committee members reviewed and approved Dr. Provost's goals. One of his goals is equity focused, and it is to uncover and address the root causes of student subgroups not performing to their full potential. This speaks to the shared responsibility between the committee and the leadership to address inequity. Finding number 2, the school committee policies and major policy documents lack a clear definition and metrics for student success. In our framework, we attempt to understand whether the governing body holds its members and district leaders accountable, again, to modeling and advancing a more equitable, inclusive district culture and success outcomes for all stakeholders. Our finding here is that the committee does not rely on a clear vision of success to which it can hold itself and leaders accountable. The lack of clarity around what success looks like in the district prevents this. Along with the lack of consistent disaggregated data use, in other words, it's difficult to know what is most important in terms of student success and the committee to measure if all groups of students are on the path to achieving success. The quotes here from a wide variety of stakeholders reflect confusion about what matters most in the district when it comes to student success outcomes. There are conversations happening, particularly at the high school level, starting to inform a shared vision, which is excellent. Also, Dr. Provost developed a list and chart of 10 student success indicators. In essence, this work can be categorized as the beginning of something positive. The school committee is uniquely positioned to ensure that there is a clear vision for success and that the district continually and consistently uses disaggregated data to reflect on the extent to which all students are on track towards that vision. Now that we have concluded our findings, we will transition to the recommendations, and thank you for bearing with us on that. The recommendations are grounded in the findings and written with them in mind. They are specific to the district's context, and they include resources for consideration of your next steps. We made every attempt to acknowledge areas where you've already committed to areas of work in your strategic plan and to help you strengthen those efforts. So Destiny, can you please kick us off with the recommendations?
Absolutely, Carmen. All right, recommendation number 1 is to develop a district-wide and community shared understanding of the district's vision and plan for advancing equity. Some potential key activities for these recommendations are: 1, to establish a stakeholder-facing area of change that leaders can continuously reference, which communicate the rationale for focusing on equity and how current strategic priorities will advance equity. In the report, we will provide some examples of other school district series of change statements as you are class map. The second one is develop shared terminology for diversity, equity, and inclusion, related terms used throughout the district. And in the report, we're also going to provide some examples of a list of research-based equity terminology as well. The third one is revisit the vision and strategic plan and district policies to make equity commitments more explicit, and then establishing the opportunity to continually and explicitly interrogate the extent to which equity is being advanced through major systems within the district. With the last key activity, we suggest that the school committee can support outreach and engagement efforts to ensure that the community has opportunities for input and is informed about the progress in these areas. We believe that through these key activities, we see a clear thread on if these are all aligned and streamlined, all stakeholders will be clear and will be able to ground the rest of the district initiatives in an aligned way. Recommendation number 2 is to provide professional learning and development opportunities and ongoing support for staff to develop their skills and comfort in engaging in courageous conversations about diversity, equity, inclusion, and equity-based practices while aligning staff feedback and evaluation structures to district priorities. So some potential key activities for this recommendation are: 1, leveraging existing professional development systems to actively embed newly identified vision and barrier actions regarding equity. So to do this, we're suggesting that the district does an audit, auditing the current learning opportunities and their alignment to existing strategic priorities, and identify equity, vision, and their action. Secondly, identify a team or district of district and school leaders and educators to spearhead the revision process for monitoring the piloting of the professional development sessions. The second potential key activity would be to revamp the evaluation and feedback processes that can help improve the professional development opportunities within the district. This could entail creating a vision for evaluation that includes the creation and communication of the process, the frequency, and how the evaluation data will be used to support development, training evaluators on how to use the evaluation process, creating opportunities for stakeholders to increase their comfort and be better prepared to engage in courageous conversations about diversity, equity, and inclusion, consistently and proactively seeking staff feedback to inform changes to the evaluation process, priorities, and structures. And then the third potential key activity would be to increase comfort levels and be better prepared to engage in conversations about and across lines of difference through leveraging resources and support systems. So this is really about supporting stakeholders in their development, developing their skills of having these courageous conversations, which is vital to support shifts in beliefs and practices. It can also benefit to sustain the implementation of equity goals if stakeholders are giving a safe space that allows them to grow at their own pace. So in the report, we'll be adding some resources to get started. I'm going to pass the next recommendation to Krista.
Thanks, Stephanie. Recommendation 3 is to continue to fully develop and implement the district's multi-tiered system of support in order to address students' academic, behavioral, and social emotional needs. We think this starts with taking stock of what's in place already relative to the state's guidance for building strong multi-tiered system of support. So using a self-assessment to identify areas of strength and focus. We've done a little bit of that, and we could go further. Our report findings highlight the need for the district to embed more culturally sustaining instructional practices into the Tier 1 or core curriculum, building on the momentum that you have in selecting strong core curriculum already. This is an important component of a strong system. For that, the district needs to develop a shared vision of what that kind of instruction should look and sound like in every classroom in Hampton-Wilbraham. We believe utilizing the state's video library and learning tools can help support leaders in building a shared vision. Next, we urge you to identify a suite of academic interventions in ELA and math and dedicate clear time in the schedule at every grade level so that students can receive the interventions after they are identified using those universal screeners for place. This work is already underway, but it needs to be in place for next school year so that you can begin to address the outcome gaps that we've identified in the report. Additionally, we believe that the strategic plan action step around identifying Tier 1 and 2 supports for social and emotional and behavioral needs is necessary but insufficient to address the increasingly intense needs of students that the district has been experiencing since COVID began. Tier 2 and Tier 3 interventions must be in place for any student who needs them in order to reduce the reliance on special education services and to ensure that all students are in school ready to learn. Finally, strong MTSS, or multi-tiered system of support, is built on a foundation of shared beliefs and mindsets. Between the data shared in this equity audit report and the resources contained and the links that we'll share in the recommendation, we believe that you will be able to identify a set of key beliefs and start to build shared learning experiences for everyone in the district to help socialize and reinforce those messages with all staff. So an example of this might be a shared belief that all students, including those with disabilities, are capable of reaching grade level standards when given the right support. That is a key mindset necessary for strong implementation of a multi-tiered system of support. I'm going to pass that back to Carmen.
Thanks, Krista. So recommendation 4 is to establish a communication system to build and foster relationships with all parents, families, caregivers, with a particular focus on enhancing communication, a particular focus on enhancing the communication system with fact that communication is in your strategic plan, you may consider consulting with existing committees and councils, as well as leveraging family feedback to understand what families and students need, and use that information to inform areas such as the development of the new website. Consider centralized support for non-English speaking families. Involve students, families, and community partners on the climate teams to gain various perspectives. So, for example, ensure that all students, families, and community partners have frequent opportunities to share their perspectives and feedback on climate and culture, SEL programming, anti-bullying and harassment, as well as discrimination policies and practices. Regularly communicate and solicit feedback on the effectiveness of the communication system once it is developed. Now I'll pass it back to Krista.
Recommendation 5 is to establish a new system for managing disaggregated student data that increases the data literacy skills of all district leaders and school staff. I'm sure you won't be surprised to hear me say that disaggregated data is the engine that drives achieving excellence for equity. We want to encourage you all to continue to build your data management system, as well as a team of data leaders under the leadership of Superintendent Provost. These folks can become proficient and fluent users of disaggregated data who can help strengthen the systems within the district. It also increases distributed leadership and builds school leaders' capacity to establish or enhance their own school-based data teams. A very helpful tool that we hope you'll use as an anchor for this work is DESI's Data Toolkit. The toolkit provides structured resources, processes, protocols that district leaders and staff would use for increasing their data literacy skills as they also design equity-enhancing school improvement plans. We think with the design of new SIPs, new school improvement plans, we think this is an opportune time to practice and embed new skills. It's an authentic way for leaders and staff to begin to use disaggregated data in a more meaningful way to guide our collective efforts towards equity. It will be an opportunity for you as a school committee to ground your monitoring of outcomes in disaggregated data as well. That's Denny with recommendation 6.
Yeah. Recommendation 6 is to develop and implement new strategic approaches to attract, recruit, hire, and retain a more diverse staff at all levels throughout the district. Specifically, we recommend accelerating the timeline for key activities and strategic plan beginning in fiscal year 24 and completing in fiscal year 25. Some potential key activities for this recommendation are for the district to consider the formation of a HR diversification advisory committee to provide guidance and feedback on district-wide strategic objective 5B to establish and develop consistency, continuity, and inclusion in staff hiring, recruitment, and support to sustain and enhance school and district leadership. An example of this would be to have a committee members to represent a variety of stakeholders, including staff leaders, union reps, teachers, paraprofessionals, support staff, caregiving members, students, members of the DEI team, and community members with expertise in related fields. Special attention should be made to ensure diverse identities beyond community members' roles and for interests in diversity, equity, and inclusion. The next key activity would be to revise the district's and schools' HR policies, and protocols. This will look like revising the district's written policies and procedures related to recruitment, hiring, and retention, and provide training to hiring teams around the revisions. Revising the district's screening and interviewing questions to ensure alignment with the district's updated policies, core values, and equity commitment. In the report, we will provide articles and resources to support this. And then revising the teacher mentoring program to include new and first-year teachers who enter the district to receive support. The next one would be to develop a robust staff diversification plan that includes goals, action steps, timelines, and key performance indicators to monitor the implementation and progress. Another key activity would be to establish a tracking system and data collection that enable monitors of those goals outlined in the plan. And then lastly, the district would expand recruitment networks through partnerships and outreach such as colleges, and schools of education. The district is located near several colleges of education whose undergraduate and graduate programs are sources of pipeline development, outreach, recruitment, as well as continuing education and certification programs. And then secondly, community organization. So culturally based organizational partners can share employment opportunities with their members. I'm going to pass it back to Carmen for recommendation 7.
Thank you, Destiny. So in considering that COVID did impact the writing of school improvement plans, recommendation 7 is to create school-specific school improvement plans that enable principals to leverage people, time, programs, and financial allocations to focus on school-level needs and prioritize the access opportunities and success outcomes of marginalized students. You may do this by possibly establishing a new school improvement planning committee that includes representatives from groups of students, families, staff, and community members, analyze student performance, teacher evaluations, and community feedback for patterns, as well as identifying the root causes, align systems to the school improvement plans, from educator evaluations to budgets and resources. Our 8th and final recommendation addresses the issue of bullying. Even though we have addressed aspects of social emotional learning, we found it necessary to call out bullying specifically due to the impact that it has had on students' readiness to learn and their ability to feel safe, included, and like they belong in the school community. The recommendation is to develop a plan to better understand and more effectively address bullying, harassment, and discrimination within the district. It was stated in the strategic plan that desire, and we recommend leveraging ongoing support with a partner such as the Safe Program for LGBTQ students and the Massachusetts Aggression Reduction Center, conduct focus groups with staff, families, and students to better understand what is happening in the district around identity-based bullying and bullying in general. Examine disaggregated district and school level data related to bullying and harassment, discrimination, and discipline practices in relation to bullying. Update the district's bullying intervention and prevention plan to outline specifically how the district can plan to prevent incidents of bullying, harassment, and discrimination, as well as how the district plans to support vulnerable student populations. Additionally, as a part of the website updates, consider how we might improve the reporting process for bullying. So in summary, we have concluded our recommendations. You are well on your way on your equity journey. The first step in the equity journey process is awareness, and you clearly have that. Your leaders are very much invested in making the school experience for all students one of success that provides them with the skills to become world-ready citizens and productive members of society who are fully prepared for the next phase of their lives, whether that entails college, the military, careers, or even a gap year for some students. You have a strong community that is committed to supporting the district in many different ways. They are all very interested in and invested in the youth in your school district, and we greatly appreciate being a part of your journey. So, as stated in your vision, together we soar to success. We sincerely hope that our findings and recommendations will assist you on your path to success. Thank you so much for your time and attention. Now we can open the floor for questions.
First and foremost, I want to thank you so much for the time and energy and efforts that were put into this. Not only just to gather all the pieces of information, but the data to be able to report it back out to us. I had a specific question with regards to,
We need to tell if we can't hear you.
how about now? Sorry about that.
No?
can't.
You know what? Maybe you can come up here tomorrow.
We could put the mic right
Please don't.
there, by the speaker. Try that. Here. Can you try again? I'll see if it works.
Can you hear me now?
That's better.
Okay, sorry about that. Our microphones are new and they're kind of exciting. I just wanted to say thank you again for the time and effort and energy that you and your team have put together to put the presentation together for us. It looks like it was a lot of work and we appreciate it. I did specifically have a question with regards to your slide on page 19 for the equitable student access and outcomes with regards to the percentage of students meeting or exceeding expectations on MCAS. Because if you do recall that within the last year or two, families had the option of opting out. Does that take into account any of that information, and do you know if that's accounted for?
Just to clarify, we're talking about the students with disabilities participating in MCAS.
Yes, I think so.
Yes. It does not explicitly account for opt-out, so we are just comparing the percentage of students tested and participating. But the rates of participation for both non-disabled students and disabled students were incredibly comparable in terms of overall enrolled students.
Okay.
So it doesn't explicitly account for that, but I can say from looking at the numbers, I'm not noticing a large difference in opt-out rates across those two groups.
I just am concerned because I think there were a number of people who, because since COVID, have opted out once they were given that opportunity. So then the data may not accurately depict all of the students that may be underserved.
Thank you.
Yes, I did also have a question. There were many references to school leaders versus district leaders, I think. And I was just wondering if you could define the difference. Sorry.
Yes. The folks who took the school leader survey would be principals,
Okay.
and the folks who took the district office leader survey would be folks who work in the central office, so not school leaders.
Okay. And I know that there's some of the recommendations is a matter of reviewing data. One of the things as a district we've struggled with is we hear that the teachers in the district have information based off of students, the testings that they do, but metrics has always been a problem for us at the school committee level, I think. Maybe I'm speaking on behalf of myself. Is there a way or a means or a method of how maybe a district like ourselves could figure a way out to look at metrics? I mean, you guys talk about metrics, how people should be looking at data. Do you have any recommendations?
I think that our attempt to start to answer that with and alongside you is really contained in two places. So recommendation 7, specifically around school improvement plans, where individual schools are going to be identifying the data and the metrics that are most relevant to the students that they serve, and building goals and key performance indicators that can be monitored at the district and school committee levels that can give you insights, can give you a line of sight into how are all kids doing. And then from there, making sure that your district data management system and the tools that you have, the metrics, you could call them, are able to be disaggregated to see every subgroup of kids. Are low-income students doing well in this way? Do we not have a tool in this area? Do we need a tool that can be disaggregated based on income level, for example? Those types of questions really can be answered by that district data team and by those SIP planning teams in the next few months as they develop these individual school SIPs. We know that right now it's a unified school improvement plan. when they're individualized to the school, I think that's going to really help start to answer some of those key foundational questions for you as a school committee. What are we missing? What metrics do we not have? How can we break them down? And then what do we need to monitor ongoing to give us that line of sight into how students are doing?
In the amount of time that you folks have been doing these audits, have you ever had conversations with the Mass Association of School Committees, the Mass Association of Regional School Superintendents, or even the regional school districts, any of those groups at all?
I cannot speak to that. I don't know if Carmen, you had insight into that. I know that we continuously reference tools that are shared by those organizations. We think that they often present really strong tools for school committees and for school districts to use. I don't know about ongoing, I don't know.
So,
That is correct, Krista. That's correct.
So the only, just for clarification, the reason I had asked is we as a school committee are, follow some of the guidance of the Mass Association of School Committee when it comes to policies. And so I think it would behoove not just us as we do and look at our policies, but maybe an organization like yourself to maybe try to reach out to them to help them understand as they provide guidance and policies that they kind of meet you guys with what you have to say. Because I think you brought up a lot of really great points that we as a district have to look at. But I think some of that can also come from those policies that were established back in 2018 that you made reference to, because a lot of that guidance came from that organization.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yes.
So I had some people come up to me over the past week when they knew this was going to be discussed, and they were saying, like, will there be comparative data? How do we hold up against other schools in the district? How do we hold up against other, towns and areas in Western Mass and all of Massachusetts? What was interesting for me is that the results of this survey all came from our students, our teachers, our administrators, our school committee members, and our families. And I didn't feel that there were any judgments at all from Mass Insight. In fact, you spent a lot of time highlighting a lot of the positives, which I appreciated. How would you respond to this request for a broader comparison?
I missed the last part. Did any of you hear the last part?
Yeah, how would we respond to the sentiment or the urge to compare across districts regionally? Which I can take a stab at answering, and of course anyone who wants to chime in as well, feel free. But I think that's a natural inclination, right? Am I sending my child to a school that's helping them succeed? Is a question that every parent has top of mind. Like I parent two small kids. They are not yet in public school. They will be, and it would be disingenuous of me to pretend like I wasn't thinking about where are my children going to attend school and how does that compare? What choices could I make about where I choose to live and where I choose to send my children to school? Natural inclination. And yet we know that there is so much within a school district that needs to be examined. Two children can go to school at the same school and have very different experiences. And they might be a wider set of differences than two children who go to different schools in different school districts. And so I acknowledge that is a natural question for parents and community members to have, and that we can learn a lot about holding up a mirror to ourselves and to asking, is every student having the same experience at this school and in this district? And so I think it's an ongoing conversation to say, totally valid thing to ask, and we have a few more questions that we should answer together.
Bring it up close. Make sure your light's on.
Thanks again for all of this. Quick question for you. So I noticed from a data standpoint, most of your data sets, when it pertained to MCAS, primarily reflected grades 3 through 8. I think there's only one that reflected grade 10 from an ELA standpoint. Is there a difference in the data as you look at it at the high school level as opposed to grades 3 through 8 would be the first question.
There are differences. The body of the report, you will see both 3.8 and grade 10. On the slides, I'll just be honest, we picked ones that were easy to see sometimes, and that we knew that you could easily zero in on what we were trying to emphasize. And so in the body of the report, you'll see if we're talking about students with disabilities, you will see both subjects, you will see 3.8 and you will see grade 10. And when there are major differences in the report, we will point them out. Like the gaps are smaller in high school in some places, sometimes they're just as wide. It would be hard for me to make a generalization because we are talking about so many subgroups of students. We are talking about both subject areas and we're talking about 3.8 averages and grade 10 averages. There are differences in the 3.8 span between what's happening in 5th grade and what's happening in 8th grade, and those weren't examinations. So there is a lot to wade through in terms of the who and the what across multiple subgroups, across subjects and grades, and it's just hard to generalize.
So then that leads to my second question, and that was how closely did you look at the year over year or grade over grade differences so that if you see an increase, let's say from grade 4 to grade 5, you can be incredibly surgical on the economically disadvantaged, say, okay, what changed at this juncture, and then we can attack that. So did you look at it, and do we have a view that will show us at a grade level where we have our biggest disparities and where the biggest jumps occur?
We didn't do, I didn't conduct, say, a cohort analysis. I think that can be really difficult to do with, as an outsider with publicly available data. It is something I absolutely think needs to be a part of that planning process, where folks who know those specific cohorts of students and might be able to account for curricular differences, enrollment differences, changes to other programmatic elements, they can say, look, there was a big increase when these kids went from 4th grade to 6th grade, and we know what might have driven that change. It's really hard for me to speculate on it.
But I'm not asking you to speculate.
Data and not knowing kids, that process you're describing is incredibly important.
Yeah, so I'm just asking, did you do it, or do we have that information so that we can see that?
I did not do it. You would not find necessarily a cohort analysis in the report.
Thank you. Appreciate it. And then I have comments for us, but we can wait and do that after questions.
Does anyone in the audience have any questions?
Just come over here.
No, you're gonna use the microphone.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Hi, Christina Garrett, district parent. I'm not sure where I'm supposed to be looking.
Oh, yours, I turned it off.
Very good.
Oh, okay. When you say students with disabilities, are you?
Why don't you move forward? I think for some reason.
Is it
There you go.
a
Stay
zone
right
issue?
there.
Okay, sorry. No, it's all right. When you say I'm Catholic, so I'm used to. Sorry. When you say students with disabilities in the report, are you referring to everyone with an IEP and a 504, or is it just students with IEPs or students with certain needs? I just hope you can clarify.
It is students with IEPs only, because that is how DESE reports, that's how their definition of students with disabilities, and so that is the publicly available data. They do not report on students with 504s specifically.
Okay. And I have another quick question, if that's okay.
Sure.
When you're talking about low-income students, I know now that Massachusetts the last year or two has done the free lunch program. How do you know if his family identifies as having low income if everyone's getting free lunch? Like, would a parent have to disclose that?
Students are identified as low income in the school district student information system, and then so when they take MCAS, the DESE, Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, is able to disaggregate their results based on what is in place in the school's student information system. And so there are multiple ways that the school identifies students as being from low-income families. I can answer that more explicitly in a second, but there are several ways that the school verifies a student's low-income status.
Okay, thank you.
And I'm sorry, did that answer your question? I think that's what you were asking.
Yes, it did.
Are there any other questions? Patrick, your comment.
Just around professional development. So I think it came through pretty loud and clear that there's a real need for professional development for those of us that have been on the negotiations subcommittee for the past 2 Unit A negotiations. That is something that Unit A has been begging for. So as we look at how to move forward, it is crystal clear that this is now a third data source that has been incredibly vocal on the need to revamp how professional development occurs and how voices are heard for enhanced and in some cases individualized professional development. So as you look at the budget in future years, I would pay a really close attention to how can we improve that from a funding standpoint, but then also from a process standpoint.
That's an interesting point because during the strategic plan development that the community, the group that had that was one of the things that those that were teachers and educators in that group brought up specifically, and that's kind of, I think, how we learned about the requirement or the need for the horizontal and vertical learning across the schools, across, the grade levels, that was the big ask was professional development.
I have a question. How do you generate change with the fact that we have the strategic plan, now we have the equity audit, and we have the finances of the district? All three of those have to work together to make a better experience for our families and our children. How do we align those?
I think your question is how do we align those?
Yes.
This was a question from a school leader as well, and I don't know if it was so much a question from the school leader as a statement of triangulating these things and doing a crosswalk between what is in our strategic plan, what this equity audit recommends we do, and what our budgets and our school plans necessitate that we do. Felt like something that would be really important for folks to engage in at the start of the new school year. Have we accounted for all of these recommendations at different levels of the organization? Have we allocated time, money, people, and programming to the places that we said we would and that we are being urged to through this equity audit? And so I do not disagree with that school leader's take that a crosswalk of those documents and of those priorities need to take place. But again, we did attempt to address areas in your strategic plan and our recommendations. So I do want to just emphasize that as well. We're really grounded in the fact that you have a plan. There are places where you have momentum, and we want to build on that and push you further and farther and deeper into the work that you're already committed to doing. So in that way, we hope we've set you up for some success with that.
Thank you.
I want to chime in here too. I think I heard this question. So one of the things that we do for districts is we provide support in modifying strategic plans with crosswalks of various plans. So sometimes a district may need support in that area because it can become confusing. And so then we bring in an outside pair of eyes to actually look at the different plans that you have. They can kind of help you triangulate, as Krista said, and do a crosswalk to arrive at a place that really addresses and aligns all of your plans.
Thank you. I know that a few years ago when we started on this journey, we were looking at Framingham's equity audit, and they had used your group. I think we're a small district. Framingham was able to do an entire status of people, and I'm trying to think of the word. They had like an assistant superintendent become the assistant superintendent of equity. We don't have that kind of resources, but we have the same need to have all of those things working together, so we come out with a really cohesive and strong statement, so that the things that were hard to see today for me as a school committee member, so we can start working on them from each of the areas I said, budget and also leadership. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd like to thank you guys very much for the presentation. I have one question. It's on slide 23, and this is actually a question that I would pose to the team at Mass Insight, and then I probably would ricochet it over to John. If we look at the graph on the right-hand side, in 2018, the percentage of students meeting or exceeding expectations on the MCAS for grade 10 ELA, if we look at it for low-income students, it was 93%, and for non-low-income students, it was 99%. There was a 6-point shift. The next year, starting in 2019, those numbers dropped to 76 and 52%, and basically, this school district has hovered in that same range. So the first question I have for Mass Insight is, because you've done a number of these audits, so when you look at that data, is that pretty consistent across other districts that you've looked at? And have you talked to those other districts about why was there such a dramatic dip in the proficiency on the grade 10 ELA exam between 2018 and 2019?
I imagine, Dr. Provost, you can speak to this with more certainty and with more detail than I could, but my understanding, I was not a high school teacher at the time, but that MCAS changed dramatically, new standards, new proficiency cuts were created. It essentially is a different test. But Dr. Provost, happy to kick it to you. Do you feel like you can explain better than I can?
Yeah, is that something that you've seen though in other districts that you've done audits on as well? Okay.
Yes, it is a statewide trend. It is not unique to your district.
Yeah, I would just share to amplify that point. I remember being at a state level meeting when this change was taking place, and part of the reason for the change was numbers were bumping up against 100%. And there was a feeling that the test needed to be changed because it could no longer separate schools, because we had gotten pretty close to universal proficiency on the 10th grade test. So then the next year, it was a new set of standards, and across the state, everyone was at a different place.
Hi, my name is Karen Romano. I'm a parent in the district. When we're talking about equitable access and we're looking at our schools, it seems to me that what we're seeing in the schools is probably also what we're seeing in the community as a whole. And so my question is, are there recommendations in how the school district and the communities within Wilbraham and Hamden can look at these things in conjunction and figure out, because I don't see how we fix it on the school level if we don't fix it at the community level, and vice versa. So I think unless we can get the school district and the towns on board to make overall changes, I think we're going to struggle with really seeing the outcomes that we're looking for. And so I guess my question is what have you seen in other districts, or what are your recommendations for how we make that connection between the district and the communities in order to really affect change?
I think that the point that you're making is a theme that certainly came through in our stakeholder engagement. The ties between the towns and the school district are strong, and that is a positive thing, and it can also make change harder. The ways in which they're so intimately tied. I think the place where we tried to account for that the most was in our recommendations around stakeholder engagement and around communication in all aspects in every recommendation, and thinking about how do you involve prominent leaders and folks in the community with specific knowledge, skills, and interests in the particular areas that you're problems that you might be trying to solve. So when we're talking about hiring, when we're talking about recruitment, how are we involving community leaders who have knowledge around communication, around have involvement with different community groups and organizations, and how do we make those partnerships stronger that keeps us closer in lockstep as we attempt to solve problems in the district, but are obviously not isolated to being a school district problem, right? It might be a regional problem, it might be a statewide problem, but involving community stakeholders strategically is going to be an important part of pretty much every recommendation that we've given you.
Thank you for your question. And the one thing I want to mention is I think we are starting in the right direction to possibly change that. I think that started when we decided to do a brand new strategic plan that included community members, educators, parents, everybody from the community that wanted to be involved. We had a large group of people in a room that did that strategic plan, that showed up every few weeks to do it, brought back the product we have. And I think from that, one of the things that came about that is the next step will be to figure out the utilization of our buildings and some other aspects, which will bring us to looking at the regional agreement. I think once we had the opportunity to collectively, as both communities, as one whole, come up with a determination of how we want that to be modified, I think you'll see additional changes. I think we're in that path. It's just not going to probably happen as quick as most people would like to see, but I think we're starting to see a change in the folks in the community where they want to see more bringing things together, having an individuality between it being one school district where each community is entitled to their own individuality as far as, one is Hamden, one is Wilbraham, but I think everybody wants the best interest for the students and the kids in the district, and I think that collectively is the first step to us being one united front. So we're slowly getting there, but I don't think it's going to happen really quick.
If I could, I would just point out at a couple school committee meetings ago, I think we saw a good first step with the play structures that are being implemented in the early elementary grades that are 100% accessible. I thank the school administrators who took the time in to research those, and I would remind everybody in the community that those were funded with Community Preservation Act funds. And so that's a good example of how the schools and the towns can partner to actually address these issues.
So there was a lot of concern about this report when we decided and made the motion to have this report done. I think a lot of people are thinking, okay, we've had the conversation, now we can move on. When I say we've had the conversation, now we can address some of these issues and have more conversations. True change starts at home, right? But I think schools can support this and maybe be the spark to help this happen. It is okay to feel uncomfortable. It is important to have difficult conversations. It's important to identify the hidden and unconscious biases that we all have towards different groups, different from us. I know that some of our staff, they have concerns about how to address certain types of bullying towards certain groups. And I think this reflects back on the need for professional development and ties it all in, where we need the teachers, the students, the administration, and the families. We all have to work on this together. And to basically, Karen's point there, we all have to want this for true change to happen. I think it's a challenge. I have a 26-year-old daughter and a 10-year-old son, and I have to be better for them because they're gonna face things in this world that I have to be able to advise them on. I need to be better. I need to sweep out the cobwebs of what we would call racism, sexism, you know, in my own head. I was at a meeting, and there was 5 people at the meeting, and I said, okay guys, are we ready to begin? And I realized I was the only male. They weren't guys. It's just little things like that. It's not political correctness, it's politeness, it's cleaning out the cobwebs. So, thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
If I may, before this part ends, I do want to acknowledge and thank the members of the DEI team who helped to develop the specifications that led eventually to MI being selected, and who will be my partners in helping to lead this work forward. So some of them are here, some of their parents are here, and I think it's just important to give a shout out to all of them. So I'd like to recognize Alyssa Mitchell, who's a 9th grade student at Minnetonka Regional High School, Cameron Colon, who's an 8th grade student at Wilbraham Middle School, Sierra Robertson Barron, who is a 10th grade student at Minnetonka Regional High School, Georgina Trebi, who's the information specialist and librarian at the high school, Ismael Colon, or Ish, who's an 8th grade student at Green Meadows School, Katie Manuel, the assistant principal at the middle school, Kelly Norris, creative writing teacher at Minnetonka Regional High School, Kristen Sapowski, board certified behavior analyst at the middle school, Christina Guerin, a parent and member of the Parent Advisory Association, or Nicole Lantania, a 2nd grade teacher at Stony Hill Elementary, Renee Bracey, a child and family therapist, PTO president of Mile Tree Elementary School, Renee Considine, school adjustment counselor, school career coordinator at the high school, Steve Hale, principal of the high school, Tiffany Mitchell, science teacher at Mile Tree Elementary School, and Zimara Lobato, the chief of staff for Western Mass Economic Council and a community member. So thank you for helping us get to this point, and I'm really looking forward to your support as we take the next steps in the journey.
Just quickly, John, a couple of things. In addition to all of those people that you mentioned, I'd also like to thank you and all of the district administration staff for the countless hours that you put into providing all of the data and information to provide as complete of a report as we got. You guys deserve an awful lot of credit. Thank you. Great job.
Here, here.
Yeah, that was 350 pieces of our text.
Thank you very much. And thank you to Mass Insight for the presentation. We will continue with...
I'm just going to get my
Oh, sure.
Thank you, Mass Insight.
Here, take this one. Take this one.
Thank you guys, appreciate it.
Thank you so much. It's been our pleasure. Have a great night. Thank you all.
Thank you. So now it's my pleasure to introduce Vanetta Lightfoot, who is the new Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging Coordinator for the Lower Pioneer Valley Educational Collaborative. Prior to accepting this position, she served as the Multicultural Affairs Operations Manager for Springfield Technical Community College, where her work included bringing speakers and performances on campus. She was also instrumental in creating the Heart of a Man, a program that created space for men to engage with each other with the goal of combating sexual violence on campus. She also facilitated the Movies That Matter series to expand student perspectives on various social issues. And her periodic table of banned books has now become a permanent exhibit at the college library. She was also the recipient of the 100 Women of Color and the 40 Under 40 Awards. And in the few months I've known her, I've grown to appreciate her for her positivity, her enthusiasm, and her support, and it's my pleasure to introduce her to the district tonight.
Thank you so much for having me. I have to confess, this is my very first school committee meeting, so.
I'm glad you're the first.
Yes. Well, I'm really honored to be here. This job has been a great new experience for me. I have 17 years in education in terms of experience, but most of it is in higher ed. So this has been a really nice transition into elementary and secondary ed, and I'm learning so much. And all of the superintendents, including Dr. Provost, have been great in ushering me in and helping me to understand mostly the acronyms, because everybody uses a lot of acronyms. But, you know, getting to see how it all works, how it all functions. So it is my honor to be here tonight and to meet all of you, and just to let you know that I plan to support you in any way possible. So my role, I do cover the 7 districts that the Lower Pioneer Valley Educational Collaborative supports, but I have made it very clear amongst all the districts that if you need me for anything, so for instance for professional development, anything that's come out of this plan, please feel free to involve me. I will be here. I've already started to meet with some of your students. I have met some of the staff, both at the district level and our teachers and administrators, and everybody's been so welcoming and helping me along the way. So feel free to tap me for anything that you might need, and thank you again so much for allowing me to come into your district and assist you in this work, but also just welcome me into this process. Thank you.
Thank you for being here, and congratulations. So we will continue with the increase the use of school choice funds. If there was any additional discussion from our last meeting, any additional conversation? Questions?
No, I believe the motion on the table was to use school choice funds, $40,000, in order to cover the difference in the busing costs to keep us at a 2-tier busing system.
Is that, so do I second that, or is that a motion continued over?
It should be continued over.
Okay.
Just as long as we have, yeah, Aaron, I think we do have that motion somewhere. Should be in the previous minutes.
I'm sorry, what? Any discussion?
I'm sorry, that's going to be in the consent agenda.
I think he wanted to make sure that the motion from the previous meeting about using $40,000 more of school choice money to balance out the $40,000 of only having 4 school buses cut rather than 5 school buses cut, so we don't have to change the start time.
So I think I was probably one of the dissenting voices previously on pulling from somewhere other than school choice. Was any work done to look at the budget and find an area for that $40,000 to come from other than school choice?
As Aaron explained, I think at that meeting, the most likely place it could come from is some turnover savings, which we won't know exactly what that is until the end of the summer when new staff are hired. But that's what we're looking at as a primary place to go to for that money.
So if we were to approve the next vote, it would be an additional $20,122 that could go to offset the $34,191 deficit that we are running in athletics today. So where is that $20,122 going then?
So that money, most of that money is for athletic fees. It's not all for athletic fees. What would happen is that money would go to shore up the athletic accounts so that that money doesn't have to be supplied from other parts of the budget, which would then free up that money to be used for other things such as transportation.
So more simply, we shouldn't have to use $40,000 because there's at least a $20,000 good guy right there. And then if I take a look at, or good person, sorry, Sean. So I'll take a look at the other numbers there, and if we add up our parking fees in other places, we've got at least $20,000 coming back to us in the form of increased fees as long as we vote in the affirmative for those.
That's correct.
So I would encourage us not to use a full $40,000 from school choice funds, I would encourage us to, again, look at the other places in the budget and pull it from increase that we see here to offset deficits that we're running today in athletics, or through potential savings elsewhere. I think in a $50+ million budget, you should be able to find $40,000 to cover busing versus taking it from school choice.
So I think one of the issues, though, is the availability of those funds. If we look at the fee proposal for athletics, it does raise the fees by
$20,122.
From $21,000, but these are for sports that range through all 3 seasons. And I don't believe we collect users' fees up front for sports for all 3 seasons, do we?
We do not.
Do that at the time. We do that at the time of the season. So, yeah, so that money won't be available. You won't have that full money available. You'll have whatever you get for fall sports that would be available. But then again, we're running a $34,000 deficit in the school choice, in the athletic revolving account. This would drop it down to roughly $13,000, but we're still going to have to cover that through funds through the general fund in order to cover expenses. And remember, those expenses is a revolving account. Those expenses will continue to wax and wane as busing, et cetera. We don't even know, because are we done in postseason play now? We're done. Yes.
We're done.
Okay. All right, so we don't have to worry about any more reductions from that. But I know that if we want the money up front in order to do that in the budgeting process, we have to go where cash is available.
Hey, Bill. Can you remind me again, only because I know you're a little more familiar with how the Booster Club works? So can you give me a quick little summary on where their funds go? So I only ask because when they came before us, their presentation wasn't probably as clear as they could have been. I know that with the change of people, things like that, I'm just wondering.
So the history of the Booster Club goes all the way back. It predates my time in this district. But essentially at one point, I believe it was sometime in the late 80s, there was some dissension among the different sport teams and at the different levels as far as fundraising. You have 80 kids that are on the football team and they're fundraising, and you've got 22 kids playing field hockey, right? So you've got 4 times as many kids out there canvassing the community looking for donations. And so the Boosters was created as a blanket organization in order to bring in all of these sports teams under one umbrella. And then each sports team is recognized as a spirit group. And then the spirit groups, they can coordinate their fundraising through the Boosters in order to provide fundraising at coordinated times rather than at discoordinated times. The Boosters has been, the gentlemen that run the Boosters, Mr. DiCurzio is one, Mike Flynn is another, we know Glenn Garvey. These guys have been doing it for a long time, and they're kind of ready to tap out. And so the Boosters has not been as active as it should be, and my hope is that there will be another generation of people that will come in and sort of take the reins on that. But the way the Boosters essentially works is that the spirit groups raise money. The Boosters is a tax-exempt organization, or 504(c), so they basically take those funds and then they're allowed to distribute those funds where needs are. And they try to do it in proportion with the participation level. So obviously, if you have a sport team that has, like say 80 participants, right, and they raise X amount of dollars and they have X number of participants, then they would get more of a share if the money is needed. The problem was over COVID, as we all understand, fundraising for the Boosters basically ceased to exist. But our expenses were not only there, but in a lot of ways they doubled. Right, because of spacing levels on the buses, we now had to have twice as many buses in order to transport our students to and from sporting events. So while the fundraising, and that's done through the busing and stuff is done through the athletic revolving account, but that is a different account from the boosters. So the boosters basically provides support to augment what the athletic revolving account does not cover.
So what is that, what kind of things does it cover? And again, I don't mean to put you on the spot because it's not clear and I'm trying to find that information. So like, is it just equipment? Is it just
It's usually, yeah,
the tools? Like, I know like the football team uses the pad things that you run down like.
Yeah, and that's,
like,
exactly, right? So you would have, the boosters does not cover uniforms, right? That comes out of the athletic revolving account. However, boosters would cover necessary training equipment. If wrestling, let's say, wrestling pads, they would cover, blocking shields and dummies for football. They would cover maybe balls and sticks for field hockey. So that was essentially what they were doing, was providing sort of an additional layer of support beyond what was covered in the athletic revolving account. Now, we should bear in mind that prior to COVID, the athletic revolving account was running in black, by about $40,000. So there was always a pool of money there to access. It was only through the pandemic that it was decimated. Hopefully we'll be able to build it back up again so that we can continue to provide uniforms. The athletic revolving account also pays for busing, and it also pays for officials. You're welcome.
Patrick, if we inserted the up to language, would that make you more amiable towards this motion?
No, but I don't think it really matters. So I'm just in the minority, it's fine.
So I'm trying to hear.
Yeah, no, it's all good.
Bill?
Yes.
Sharon? Sean?
Aye.
Patrick?
No.
Lisa? Yes. Maura?
no,
Myself, no. So, we're agreed.
motion passes.
Sorry, it's in. Sorry about that. Okay. We will continue to talk about the athletic fee increase. We can continue the discussion.
I had a question on the athletic fee increase, basically how we structure the athletic fees. Is there an avenue for children who get free and reduced lunch to have the fees changed appropriately?
There is, however, as was one of the findings in the equity audit, that process is not well known among the district. I think one of the things that we will have to do, regardless of what decision is made with the fees, is make it more obvious to families who are eligible for a fee reduction or a fee elimination, how to access that. I think that also may involve creating some policies around that, because I think there's not really a clear policy on how that's supposed to happen right now. The answer to the question is, right now, there is a possibility to get a waiver, but I would say that it almost should be treated as if it doesn't exist, because so few families know about it. I think we need to do a much better job. I think one of the things the equity audit says is making families who are eligible to receive waivers of fees knowledgeable about the process to receive those waivers. So that is something else to think about in this vote. To the extent that we're successful with that, we may be reducing the fees we collect, because I highly suspect that a lot of our student athletes would be eligible for waivers under the policy if it were such that students who are considered to be low income because they have been direct certified through participation in any of the state programs, participate on a sliding scale, that we would have many more students receiving a waiver. Am I being clear? I feel like,
Yeah, I'm just wondering if we should table it until we can get information to the people who are on low and reduced lunch. That's one of the piles that we can go to and know for sure they've qualified.
I wouldn't table it for too long because you've got fall sports that are upcoming, and I don't know when that payment occurs for a fall athlete, but.
So we've delayed payments for right now because of the discussion for user fees increase. So the UniPay shut off for right now for fall payments, but fall signups are open until June 30th.
So you might want to say that. Can we give him a microphone to repeat that?
Do we have other microphones beyond this?
There's another extra one, and there's actually a handheld one he was talking about that maybe for future meetings you might want to have available. But he showed me that there's a handheld one that we might want to use when we have meetings like this where people need to make a comment.
So to reiterate, in terms of our user fees right now, we have everything frozen until there's either an approval or staying with what we currently have. Fall sports signups are up and running right now until June 30th. So right now, they can register, they can sign up, and we blocked the payment process until there's a decision made for the user fees.
What are your, if you don't mind me asking, your thoughts on the increase?
Being my first year here, it's we haven't increased in over 8 years. So I think there is some time to set not a substantial increase, but a steady increase in terms of helping out with the user fees to help with transportation, officials. Not only are official fees going up, sports are now requiring, instead of 2 officials per contest, now they're increasing to 3, and that's not very budgeted, it was just given to us. Transportation costs have gone up drastically. Unfortunately, with the lack of drivers, we have to resort to coach busing, we have to resort to rental vehicles, so then that transportation cost, what we're assuming, is now much higher as well.
Is there a specific plan for?
Use the microphone.
Take door number 3. Is there a specific plan for the athletic fee increase? Because if there is, I haven't seen it.
So, as we talked about before, the athletic revolving account.
Okay, that's the first I've seen.
Sorry, the athletic revolving account is about $34,000 in the red right now, which means that money that would be paying for officials, busing, etc. All of that is going to end up coming from somewhere because those bills have to be paid. And so the question is how long can we sustain a negative balance on this and pull money away out of the general fund, which is taking money out of general education. And so, it's a difficult thing to talk about. I will tell you that I've had conversations with individuals from surrounding towns. The users' fees in some towns are substantially higher. These user fees are actually incredibly low. What's proposed is a 10% increase on this, keeping in mind what John had said about increasing people's awareness of potential reductions and/or elimination of users' fees. Your current total of $2,001,220 might actually go down substantially. So while it's a difficult decision to make, I would propose that we increase the fees. We always have the opportunity to decrease fees in the future if we need to. It's set by our policy. But I don't think we're in a position where we should be pulling even more money out of the general education fund. We know that buses are going to have to be paid for. for. We know officials are going to have to be paid for. So is there a specific use? Yes, all those things that we would have to pay for anyways, but rather than coming out of general education, it would come out of the athletic revolving account.
And is this a straight 10% increase?
I believe so. I checked the math on all of it.
Okay. And has there been any consideration to sports that don't, like cross country, for example? You know, a kid that plays football gets a lot more miniature owned equipment than a kid that decides to run cross country. So the equity around that 10% increase could be a consideration.
So
I think the other thing to consider also is if we're to adopt a waiver process that considers the 20%, 18% low income status of the district, then have we projected that out to what this fee increase will be and what we'll actually collect? Because it could be overall less revenue.
So regardless of whether or not the fee is raised, one of the things that was brought up in the equity audit is that we need to do a better job of informing parents that they may be eligible for those reductions. So what I was saying earlier is that, you know, rather than reducing from a balance of 201,000, you might be reducing from a balance of, reducing from a balance of 221,000. So I think the genie's already been out of the bottle on this. If we limit ourselves by not increasing the users' fees, and we do see a reduction because of either reduced or waived users' fees, it will impact us even more.
Yeah, no, I'm just mentioning the common calls that I get at the building level is for cross country, what is my $198 getting me?
It's a great question. So
they use buses.
So the users fees predate me. Patrick has brought it. I know Patrick has something to say about this, and I'll let him go in. But there certainly is some room for differential movement on these fees and readjustment of them. And I would ask our athletic director to provide us with more data on that so that we can, I think, more appropriately assess that. But yes, I mean, you still have buses, you still have officials, so those things don't change regardless of the sport.
Right, but there's no equipment.
No equipment?
That's about it. Buses and officials.
There's no question about it. But Patrick had something to add to it. So,
slide 42. I am often left out of discussions where my expertise would assist in situations. I would think this is a clear example where we need the input from the athletic director and from the Minnetonka Regional High School principal to weigh in on what this would look like. And right now, it's clear that this is disjointed. I wildly believe that these fees are the best deal in sports, right? So the proposed increase here is less than a 3rd through 8th grader pays to play lacrosse in our community. If you want to do a summer program around here, the going rate for 3 tournaments and about 10 to 12 practices is anywhere from $1,055 to $2,955. So if we look at it, this is a phenomenal deal. Now I recognize that there are, as we saw finding number 2, more than 71% other than agree on the financial support and process that is clearly communicated. So there's work to be done here, but I think Cheryl's recommendation is the right one, which is table it. Let's let the people that are professionals in it come up with a recommendation that makes sense, that takes into consideration all of the factors at play and what potential sports have the ability to increase more than others based off usage and the other things that they're frankly increasing the cost and the budget on.
To the point that you had, Patrick, the one question that I would have, and I would leave this to you guys, is that something that you would be able to tackle from a data standpoint in a relatively short period of time before
but I'm sorry to interrupt you, but one of the things that I think we need to take into account is, to a parent's point, when someone is going to be participating in this sport, what is that cost made up of? So I think if parents are asking, we need to make sure that that information is available. If there's a percentage of it that goes towards buses, if there's a percentage of it that goes towards equipment, if there's a percentage of it that goes towards referees, umpires, officials, as you referred to them, I think that should be outlined, because I know that it was brought up multiple times before, similar to Patrick's point, that like even hockey, the ice time is more than what that cost is right there alone. And so we end up, I think, as a district, out of the revolving fund, paying for that, I think.
Yes, but it also, one of the other things to think about those is, if I'm not mistaken, gate receipts go back into the revolving account. So if you have a sport like football, where you have a user fee of $250, which is not very large for a user fee, I paid more than that when I played, and that was 40 years ago. So I'm going to say that, you know, those user fees are low. But you know, I think all of those things need to be taken into account, because if we're putting money back into the athletic revolving account through gate receipts, well, I know that's a big bugaboo with the coaches and athletic directors around the state, is that when you get into state tournament play, you lose out on those gate receipts, and that's not fair. So it's a wider discussion. It closes the gap. I'm sorry, we just finished. It closes the gap on the athletic revolving account. If we are going to make a move on this, we just have to be mindful of the fact that there are going to be sports that registrations will have to be completed and user fees will have to be paid. So it's sort of a timely issue.
But does it make sense that now that we have a new athletic director, we have a new superintendent, and that maybe it may be worthwhile to collectively have a discussion? Maybe it's time to have that conversation that hasn't been had about user fees, schedules, how we want to do that, especially now that the MIA has made some changes into how that play works, as to what tournaments we do participate in, maybe which ones we don't.
Well, all I'm gonna say is, does it have to be decided at the school committee level? I mean, can it be something where John sits down with these gentlemen here and figure this out?
Jim, I respond to that and then add on. Yes, it has to be decided at the school committee level, because policy letter, I forget which, I think it's a G, says that all fees, fines, and whatever it is have to be approved by the school committee. The thing I wanted to add on was, looking forward in the calendar, I realized that the next meeting is actually scheduled for the 4th of July week, so I think there's going to be a discussion about moving it up until the end of June. And so I wanted to throw this question out to you.
Sorry, this was supposed to be our last meeting, but apparently another one.
If there was a meeting, if there was a meeting for the end of June, could you bring back a recommendation? Do you think that would be reasonable?
Yes. The thing I just wanted to say about gate receipts is you have to consider, if you turn around and look behind you, the only place that we can successfully do gate receipts is the football stadium. So any sport that you do at the football stadium, you can collect gate receipts. The indoor at the basketball court, so volleyball, etc., basketball in the winter, you can't collect gate receipts for a cross-country meet, a track meet, a baseball game, a softball game. It's just impossible to do. And it's not worth charging the families who have already paid the user fee to then charge them $5 to come watch their kid play. So we try to be very judicious on when and where we charge to get into events. And then the only other comment I would have is, we're focused on athletic fees. If we're increasing athletic fees, are we considering parking fee, graduation fee?
Yep.
Okay, I haven't seen those either.
There's a second page.
Okay.
You have them both, I gave you both sheets.
Thank you.
this one's actually not even on the agenda, so we can't even vote on it anyways. It specifically says athletic fees in the agenda.
So the only other fee that I can think of is graduation fee is not a part of this. If we're going to be equitable across all fees that we collect for students.
And that was one of those things that I think was asked during one of our finance meetings. The last finance meeting is it possible to get all of the fees that we have listed within one document, so when we start to have those conversations about looking at fees, that we know what those impacts are. So I mean, we're in a better position, but I think we missed something.
Thank you.
So I make a motion that we table the vote until the next meeting. I will not be here for that, unfortunately.
Can you call it?
No.
Can I come up? Can we do an all in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
Aye.
Okay, motion carries 7-0. Thank you.
Sure, motion to the next meeting. They're not going to be here.
So we're going to move on to actual public comment. Is there anyone here that would like to make public comment? If not, signed up. Okay, thank you. We will move on to the subcommittee updates. We'll start with the curriculum subcommittee. And I think Lisa is presenting the middle school program of studies.
There's one in the box over there. Am I allowed to take it out?
I don't know how it works, but
Thank you, Stephen Z, for your input.
thank you, Lisa, for taking this over and marching us through it.
Sure, is this working? Yes. Okay, thank you, everyone. At the May 22nd, 2023 Curriculum Subcommittee meeting, Principal John DeRosa and Principal Sharon Moberg presented revisions to the middle school program of study for the 2023-2024 school year. Mrs. Caruana has asked me to share a summary of the revisions. It's a little tricky to summarize, so I thought I could go through the changes that were provided by our principals. And Mr. DeRosa and Ms. Moberg are here to answer any questions you may have specifically. So you do have the draft of the program of study and the page which lists all the updates as well as the page numbers that the changes were made. Right at the beginning, a reference to assistant principal at Green Meadows School has been removed. The reference to Kay Hamilton, the counselor at Wilbraham Middle School, has been removed. The World Cultures class at Green Meadows reference has been removed. The IRR, Intensive Resource Room reference, was removed and replaced with ILC, which is the Intensive Learning Center, and that will now be located at Wilbraham Middle School. Wilbraham Middle School revised its PBIS philosophy from REACH, R-E-A-C-H, I don't know what that stood for, off the top of my head, to WMS, meaning work hard for the W, make good choices for the M, and S, stay positive. And easier for students to remember, easier to connect to expected behaviors in the building. There have been some schedule changes. Green Meadows' schedule has been revised to accommodate grades 6 and 8 with no grade 7 class. Wilbraham Middle School has been revised to extend core academic blocks to either 57 or 62 minutes, depending on the day, including a drop block each day. This creates academic blocks that allow for more effective instructional time that includes opportunities for student discourse and thinking, less rushing through content, and fewer transitions for students. Reading strategies class was added at Wilbraham Middle School to provide reading intervention. This was added in the semester 2 of the 2022-2023 school year. We just added now to the program of study. The language about the adoption and rollout of the 2016 science standards has been removed. Implementation of illustrative mathematics at Wilbraham Middle School and Green Meadows in grades 6 and 7 has been added. Not at 7 for Green Meadows, but because of the no students at grade 7 for next year. Grade 7 math pathway has changed. The accelerated math will no longer be offered for grade 7. Math strategies was added at Wilbraham Middle School to provide math intervention. Foreign language description has been updated, has an updated skills list. The reference to tests and quizzes and student grading for grade 7 has been removed. World cultures description has been removed. Modern music course and a description has been added. Skills descriptors for band have been added, and 4 fields of music study have been added, updated. The Fit for Life course description has been added. Computer science topics have been updated, including the app creator module from Project Lead the Way. And the description of the IRR, Intensive Resource Room, has been removed, and a description of the ILC, Intensive Learning Center, has been added. And those are all the changes that are listed on that update page. And any questions? I know the principals are here to kind of answer those specific questions if you have any.
I have a question for Sharon. Do we have a strategy or a policy that will tell us what to do if in the middle of next year a 7th grader moves to Hampton?
You might have been talking, we have to try to figure out that work.
Testing,
There you go.
testing. Can you hear me, Cheryl?
I can hear you. I can hear you, Sharon. Go ahead.
So the question was, is there a plan in place should we have a 7th grade student move into Green Meadows School? I think if it were one student, that would be a class of 1, and that would be extremely challenging. I think that would be a conversation with the family to make sure that they were very clear on what we were able to offer at Green Meadows in terms of the middle school. A class of 1 is certainly, you know, not a classroom for a child. It's a hard question to answer.
I guess my question was, and I'm not sure about this because our policy expert is leaving us, do we need a policy? A policy that states that there's a minimum number of students that, no?
No,
We would have to,
That's
okay,
at the discretion of the superintendent.
okay, thank you.
Thanks, Sharon.
I guess I don't understand why we're removing, just because a class doesn't exist in a building. If the document is supposed to be a living document, why would we say that we're removing something because a 7th grade class collapsed?
For the school year 23-24.
But it shouldn't matter, right? So I realize that the program of studies still goes year to year, but if a class collapses, if a student moves into town, there's still supposed to be an opportunity for it to be offered at 7th grade level. Again, you don't take into account between now and the end of the summer, you can have a child or 2 move in to go in 7th grade at Green Meadows. And if you remove that, then we're going to be back here voting to put it back in. That just because we account for that class to have collapsed, there is that opportunity where a student can move in.
I think this sample schedule just eliminates grade 7 because we don't have any grade 7 students. You know, should that change, we would still have grade 7 offerings.
But we would have to re-vote on the program of studies if that's taken out. But if it's not in there, it should still be in there. It can always be waived. Doesn't have to be voted on, but it should be, I don't know that we should be removing it completely.
So you put an asterisk in, right, if applicable or something like that.
Yeah, I think we need to do something because, just to make it legal.
Why are we removing accelerated math at the 7th grade level?
So that, I'll just speak first to it, and then the principals can jump in, but we believe that the illustrative math in grade 7 will prepare all students for algebra, and we expect that more students will be prepared to meet the criteria for the algebra part 1. John or Sharon, would you like to jump in?
So I guess I struggle fundamentally with our math approach, right? And this is consistent, we've spoken about it previously. If we have students that have the ability to complete Algebra 1 in 8th grade, they should be able to. Because what happens with the way that we do math is a student, if they want to take calculus here, has to double up 1 year in their math offerings. They can't get there because we do the part 1 and then part 2. So by removing accelerated math, I would think that would set us even farther or further back from where we could be, which would be an 8th grader completing Algebra 1 such that they can take geometry as a freshman, which allows them to get to calculus without having to take 2 classes in 1 year. So that would be the first point. Second point to it is, not all of our students end up at Minnetonka Regional High School with a block schedule. So when you have students that matriculate from Wilbraham Middle School to another school, it doesn't allow them to do what they need to do from a mathematics standpoint because we've just given them part 1. I don't believe many other schools have an Algebra 1 part 1. Most people look at it and say, you have Algebra 1 or you haven't completed Algebra 1. And so I would just encourage us to take a really hard look at removing an accelerated class that would allow students to advance faster in mathematics without having to double up in additional years in order to get to the point that they can take calculus or even AP calculus while they're here.
I think one of the things that we are trying to do is to make sure that all students can take as advanced math courses as they can, and to prevent students from being in a track at 7th grade and not having the skills or the opportunities to move forward. But I would ask John DeRocha if this isn't a change that Algebra 1 Part 1 is offered at 8th grade. So they compress the 8th grade curriculum, and then they do Algebra 1 Part 1. That's the way it's been, as far as you know.
This is, yeah, it's nothing new. I just fundamentally, we've had the conversation in multiple years and we've never done anything with it. And it challenges our students to excel without taking subsequent classes. They have to double up to get to the highest level of mathematics here. And it's just not, I just don't think it's academically appropriate. If we have the ability at a younger age to give them more, let's give them more. Let's not remove accelerated math in the 7th grade. Let's push that further, not let's get everyone to a pace that means that you have to double up if you want to advance mathematically.
I think there are two separate things there. The change to the 7th grade curriculum, we hope, is actually going to increase the number of students who are able to partake in Algebra 1 Part 1 in 8th grade, because basically what we're saying is the 7th grade illustrative curriculum is very similar to the pre-algebra class that some students are taking now. So you could say that basically all students will be taking pre-algebra. So that's one thing. What you're talking about, the second point would be whether or not you could have Algebra 1 Part 1 and Algebra 1 Part 2 both in 8th grade. That's something I haven't thought of. I don't know what my feelings with that would be, because I'm just hearing it for the first time now. I don't know that was I didn't know that was an ongoing conversation, but I don't know if anyone who has been a part has any thoughts about that. I just wanted to separate those two things. We actually think that we're giving an opportunity for more students to accelerate to what we have now. I haven't thought about is whether what we have now is accelerated enough, which is, I think, the second part of your question.
So continuing with things, and I'll be the one that's repeated it. Spanish. Why are we only offering a half year for 7th grade? And I realize that that's what we do right now, but if we're looking to advance and we've got world learners in various parts of how you look at our mission statement, we continue to offer a foreign language offering that is less than ideal. We should be providing a full year of Spanish at a minimum in 7th grade, and ideally it starts even earlier than 7th grade. Maybe a challenge this year, but I would encourage that to be something, and I think if we look at the strategic plan, if I'm not mistaken, there was a call out that foreign languages needed to be offered at an earlier year and more fully than they are right now.
That's right, you're correct, it's in the strategic plan. It isn't one of the things that was identified for this year's work plan, but it is there for the future. I don't know the rationale for 7th grade half year now, so I don't know if John can speak to that.
Yeah.
Imagine it might have staffing or financial implications.
So prior to my arrival, it was previously a half year of Spanish and a half year of reading. So it was still just a half a year. You guys hear?
I think you have to come a little bit closer to the.
We can hear you in the back. I said that prior to my arrival that there was a half year of Spanish previously and a half year of reading. We also noticed in looking at our 8th grade science MCAS scores, a lot of the deficits that we have were STEM topics. And so we added an additional half year of STEM in lieu of that reading class, but maintained that half year of Spanish that we had previously. So that's the origin of the STEM versus the reading class, but it's been a half year for a number of years. I know prior to that, there was a foreign class, which was more introductory to foreign languages, with a goal still of moving to Spanish 2 as a 9th grader here, completing Spanish 1 and 8th grade. So that's the history.
Wouldn't that create the same problem if a student doesn't go to Minnetonka, potentially, especially with the change of if someone opts to go to C-Tech, how does that foreign language impact for their freshman year of C-Tech?
I'm obviously not an educator, but I don't believe that a Spanish 2, French 2, Chinese 2, whatever, Mandarin 2, whatever it may be, I think is actually pretty appropriate from a freshman year standpoint. So I think it'd be a scenario where it would allow our students to have more enrichment in a foreign language, but it doesn't necessarily set somebody behind. And if you look at it, you can still get to, if a student wants to speak AP foreign language, they can still get to that here without having to double up many years based off the way that we have it set up.
But I think back to when we were talking about graduation requirements and what the Department of Education had and what our policy was and kind of where we fall on that, we're not exactly, I mean, we meet the DESE requirements, but we could probably be better.
We're not a model, but yes, agreed. And I think if we were to provide a full year, that would allow us to be closer to a model.
When you look at though college acceptances and what they're requiring, private schools are requiring 4 years of foreign language, and so kids are starting at 2, and you're suggesting they start at 3.
No, I wasn't suggesting that. I was just saying that I think 2 is actually, if you look at it from what it seems like, is the appropriate place for most freshmen to start. I think what it does is it just allows us to have students that are more conversational, fluent, whatever it may be, as they go through. So I think about the graduation, and if I'm not mistaken, we had 1 student stand up, or was it 2 that stood up that passed whatever the proficiency was? I think it was 1. That passed the proficiency. So when you look at it, and not saying that's the only benchmark, but if we provide more exposure to foreign language at an earlier age, potentially we see more folks. I also think if you look at the benefits of speaking a foreign language, there are many other education benefits to it as well, so it would probably be an opportunity for us for it. So I don't think it can happen this year, but it's in the strategic plan. I would encourage us to look at it so we're not just doing half a year in the future.
And I think the offerings program studies at Minnetonka, I believe you don't have a Spanish 5, so when you're starting at 2, after Spanish 4, you're going to have to move to an AP level class. That's what's offered to you.
And then my other question just had to do with related arts. So if you read, and this is not a change, but if you read in the philosophy portion of related arts, it references that the classes are assigned. Why do we assign related arts versus allow a student to select or choose the related arts if they participate?
That's changing this year. We're sending a survey to have kids fill out.
Okay.
We haven't done it yet. It's going out tomorrow to families to be completed by Tuesday to give a preference of what they'd like to take.
So that'll be a change in the philosophy piece then that we need to make?
Yeah, that could be changed.
Okay, perfect. That's awesome, that's great
It's
news.
something that we heard and something that we feel is doable.
Awesome, thank you very much.
Any other questions?
Excuse me, I lost my voice here. No more questions? Anybody else? Thank you, Lisa, appreciate it. Thank you, John, for coming. Thank you, Sharon, for being here. Appreciate your work.
Thank you very much.
All right, so next we will move on to the planning committee. So the planning committee met on Tuesday, June 6th. We met with the various schools, PTOs, school councils, CPAC representatives, and some parents. There were a total of 12 attendees. Some of the conversations that came up where there were some questions surrounding the 8th grade scheduling and the sports for 8th graders. They were questioning about and there was a discussion about the transition program being moved to the high school. It didn't present itself in the configurations that were presented, but that the transition program would be moved to the high school in all configurations. There was a question.
Sorry, can you say that part again about the transition program?
Something that was not represented in the document that was shared regarding the configurations of the transition program will be at the high school. We will located at the high school and all of the configurations presented. There were some questions surrounding why not supplement low enrollment with school choice. There was questions surrounding the impact of the special ed on elementary and the locations of programs, and wondering if there were more opportunities for an intra-district school choice. There are concerns surrounding the medical concerns and the ambulance response times in both towns. Concerns about, since in all of the configurations, we talked about pre-K being housed at Green Meadows, so there were just some concerns about the distance of pre-K at Green Meadows for those residing in Wilbraham. Concerns for the 8th graders being developmentally appropriate for them to be housed at Minnetonka. Opportunities for band, so if you're in 8th grade and the 8th grade is housed at Minnetonka, would they be able to join the high school band? There was just a comment about the transition program being an afterthought, and it was just asking for us to be thoughtful about where they're positioned and thinking, making sure that you think of students and ensuring that they have inclusive programming. There was conversation about where other districts are housing their transition programs. And so then we had discussed creating opportunities to clearly inform communities, engage families, and gather feedback both informally and formally. So, and also there was an emphasis on focusing on involving students in that feedback. But some of the conversations were not only forums in both towns, but even just over the summer having informal meetings with Bryce's with the superintendent, just making sure that we're sharing the message of where we are and just being transparent in the process and listening to feedback of parents. Another thing that came up is that the superintendent will be sending a letter to parents outlining the issues. We had talked about sharing a survey for the community, and just as I discussed, but a new or amended agreement must be approved by DESE and member committees prior to December 31st. So at our next meeting, we do have a representative from DESE attending, and that meeting will be on Tuesday at 5:30 in the IRC, where we'll be able to get some guidance on, kind of the next steps and what we should do next. Correct. I think that's it. So basically, the planning committee makes recommendations to both to the school committee, and then we would vote and any proposed changes to the regional school agreement, and then a copy of the latest approved agreement and any proposed amendment must be submitted to DESE for review prior to receiving local approval. And then each town would have to vote on the regional agreement changes, and so each town does have a special town meeting, a special fall town meeting. And then the final approval by the commissioner will be subject to legal approval and receipt of all authorized local votes.
Yeah, may I just add a little bit? So the big take from, I think, the last meeting which was something that John had said, that upon review of certain documents that we have to approve any changes by the end of this year, so the 31st calendar year, in order for it to take place in September of next year. So whereas originally we thought we had, a solid year to make some changes and have votes and such like that, or short, close to a year, we now have months. There was a lot of conversation about communications, right? And how, communication and the different ways that we can do it, brings along with it trust. And trust is something that we really need to make sure. We need to make sure that the message that is out there is the message that the truth. We don't want people, there's not going to be a school in Hamden. That's categorically not true. It will always be a school in Hamden. We agreed on that when we settled the lawsuit, and it's something I think we should memorialize in whatever language that we use in this document. I think we need to continue to work. Michelle, I don't know if you're available, I'm available, but over the summer, I think we need to get comms out, we need to have meetings, we need to, get a centralized place for communications and information. I appreciate John's going to send out a message, but a lot of these documents that we've had and we've used to share them as well, that people come to the same conclusions that we've come to, rather than just giving them our conclusions, and being available, as we all are, as school committee members, to talk to people about this over the summer. We want to make sure that when we come back in the fall, we're having lots of communications, we have a plan, and we really have the details fleshed out by then.
I would encourage you to have the details fleshed out before you, even as soon as or as close to any kind of forum you have, or having some sort of outline of what the expectations are, because people will encourage you to change things, do things, want things, and there's a lot of listening that has to happen. I think in order for us to rebuild the trust within the community, I think sometimes we just have to listen and hear what they say, take into consideration some of the thoughts. I think that was one of my biggest takeaways from the equity audit of reviewing is there needs to be a lot of listening, hearing. People don't feel like they're being heard. I think both communities are a little more open to that conversation now. I think we're in a better position to have that conversation. I think you'll have more support. I think if you lean on the select board members and some of the other groups within each town, there are places where things get posted for people to see, specifically where it impacts some of the smaller or middle grade student ages. The library is a great location for any kind of meeting, and they're both public. But I would encourage lots of forums. I would encourage not just during the week, but evening, weekend, and summertime is going to be pretty tough. It's a huge vacation timing, so if that's something you're looking to do, Facebook, I know John uses Twitter, but putting as much out as quick as possible to start to have that, to see who's interested, who, and how people can participate. But I would encourage us not to give up on even potentially Zoom just yet, or having some sort of electronic meeting, because people can do that from their phone wherever they are. It's time to have that conversation.
Yeah, agreed. And I think for the most part, during this planning meetings that we have, we've been doing a lot of listening. We haven't made any decisions. We're just listening and gathering the information. It is definitely, bringing a way or a path. It's definitely highlighting that path, but I don't think we're really making decisions. We are doing a lot of listening, which is great.
With all the groups that we've met, we have seen a theme as far as configuration-wise. Some of the more popular themes. One popular theme that came up, one of the configurations was, pre-K, Mile Tree would be K to 1, Green Meadows would be pre-K to 6, Stony Hill and Sewell Road would each be grades 2 to 5, Wilbraham Middle School would be grades 6 to 7, Minnetonka would be 8 to 12. The other configurations were Mile Tree also K to 1, Green Meadows pre-K to 5, Stony Hill 2 to 3, Sewell Road 4 to 5, Wilbraham Middle School grades 6 to 7, and Minnetonka 8 through 12. All of the configurations for Minnetonka would be 8 through 12. All of the Mile Tree configurations would be K to 1. And then the subsequent ones also, Green Meadows would be pre-K to 5. The only change would be Stony Hill and School Road would each have grades 2 to 5 in each of those buildings. Wilbraham Middle would have grades 6 and 7. And then the other option was the same. So it was Green Meadows pre-K to 5, Stony Hill grades 2 to 5, School Road grades 2 to 5, and then TWB grades 6 to 7. So those were some of the, those seem to be through all of the configurations that we discussed with each group, each separate group. Those are the most popular options. So we came across, I think there were 4 options that between other groups collectively, those were the common ones that people found to be the most beneficial for various reasons, educationally, work-wise.
Did you say that Mile Tree would be pre-K to 1?
K to 1.
So,
And then
Green Meadows would be the only pre-K.
Yeah, so it's basically, I think there's 4 options or 4 paths that are well lit right now, but they do come out into 2 buckets. You know, one is more, the schools are divided by grade, and the other one is more of neighborhood schools. I think the educators that we spoke to in the administration are leaning heavily towards by grade, and we had parents who really like the idea of a neighborhood school, especially if they have multiple kids, so they don't have to go to different schools to pick them up and drop them off.
John, since I know you're on, I believe you're on this committee with them. So I know a lot of money over the last, 8, 10 years has been spent on the middle school model. And so now we're having that conversation of it'll still be a bit of a middle school model, but now you're moving the 8th grade to the high school. And I think from a financial aspect, I think we have to understand what that overhaul is gonna look like to move that 8th grade there, and if that's gonna increase our budget, because I'll tell you right now, if you're gonna go to the towns and tell them you're gonna move a class to the high school to fill up space, they're gonna be less reluctant to give you a lot more money next year with a $50 million budget without having an idea of what that plan looks like at the same time.
Agreed. One of the other tasks that the committee has given me, besides the communication piece, is costing out all of the models. So I've asked Aaron to work on that. He's really strongly requested if we could get it from 4 to 3. It would be more reasonable for him to be able to get that done over the summer. So I think that ties into the survey strategy. If we can
The number
get
of schools options. I had the same question, but I think it's the choices to look at.
right the number of models.
Oh,
because
configurations from 4, bring it down to 3.
Right.
Okay.
So one thought about that is if we can get some survey data that helps us to sort of further narrow before we go through the process of costing each of those out in detail.
John, I would encourage you to also look at the space allotment. If we're putting the 8th grade in the first year when Minnetonka was built, I believe it was 1,264 students. And they couldn't fit in the number of lunches they needed. People were eating lunch at like 8:30 in the morning. Mm-hmm. And so that becomes something that you really don't think about, but once it hits the, anyway, just think about that.
Will do, absolutely.
I mentioned it before, though, also in the configurations, I did mention it previously, the transition program would be, well, not one, the transition program would also be at the high school. Thank you. Sorry. Finance and operations.
No meeting did not meet. Nothing to report.
Thank you. LPBEC Collaborative, Lisa.
We interviewed the 3 finalists, and we asked Alvin Morton from Chicopee Public Schools if he would enter into negotiations with us. So that's what we're doing right now. Director, yes, the executive director.
Thank you. I have nothing to report for the corporation or negotiation subcommittee, so we can go on to policy subcommittee. Mark?
Nothing to report unless my subcommittee wants to meet one last time between now and the end of June.
Sounds appealing.
Listen, I was gonna ask you if you want to do one more finance meeting. I mean, I got some time next week. I get some time the week after.
Okay, perfect. So we are going to now circle back to new business and discuss the MIAA chemical health policy. John Peck.
This was an item that Member Cunin had asked to have added to the agenda, so I think I would turn it over to him to just start the discussion.
Yeah, so, right, when we look at a lot of the conversations that we had regarding discipline, they were more about restorative and rehabilitative justice as opposed to punitive justice. And I think if we look at the MIA chemical health policy, I think it, one person's opinion, was born from a period that was focused more on punitive than rehabilitative or restorative. And so when you look at it, effectively what occurs when, and I'm reading from it, when the principal confirms, following an opportunity for a student to be heard that a violation occurred, the student shall lose eligibility for the next consecutive interscholastic contest, totaling 25% of all interscholastic contests in that sport, but it can then carry over. So if you look at it, it's pretty significant. And then it also has specific language that no exception is permitted for a student who becomes a participant in a treatment program. Now, they do recommend that the student be allowed to remain at practice for the purpose of rehabilitation. But I guess the piece I would look at is when we look at it and we think about the amount of mental health issues that we see in students today, these didn't exist when that policy originally was born by the MIAA. And there is such an opportunity, depending upon how a community investigates, looks at communication from police, et cetera, that students can be treated differently depending upon the community that they are in. If we look at most statistics, it's roughly 7% of all high school athletes become a college athlete. So let's imagine a scenario where a coach is coming to see, and I'm going to use you, Maura, for the example, coming to see Maura, and all of a sudden they say, where's Maura? She's not here. Oh, she's suspended because of the chemical health policy. Well, if it's only 7% of all student athletes at the high school level, cross Maura's name out, I'm not going to deal with her, let me go find somebody else. And so if we look at it, I don't think the policy really supports allowing students to learn from their mistakes and allowing students to grow from it, as well as being more restorative or rehabilitative of nature. So is the MIA going to change? I don't know. But the specific language I saw in there, when a principal confirms. So as a committee, would you want to look at a policy where potentially those scenarios are handled by a vice principal as opposed to a principal, which allows us greater latitude or discretion to support our student athletes and to support our young students who may need help. And it's not, we're going to throw the book at you and you're going to lose 25% of your season, but this will allow you to potentially enter a rehabilitative program or whatever it may be, while maintaining something that may be competing that is important and part of that journey to rehabilitation. So it's just something that, to me, as I was looking at it, it's not in line with everything else that's moving to, if we look at the changes that were made for suspension, expulsion, et cetera, this is kind of the old guard Reagan drug policy sentencing that we still have in place, when I think society and the world has shifted a bit from where we were when the policy was created. That's all.
With regards to chemicals, is that just such as alcohol and narcotics, or does that also include performance enhancing?
There's specific language for performance enhancing.
Policy includes products such as NA or near beer inhalants, defined as any substance that produces a mind-altering effect when inhaled, and misuse of over-the-counter medications and substances used for purposes of altering one's mental state.
Okay. All right, thank you. Do we want to have some discussion on this? Is this a motion that we?
No motion. It's just something I would encourage you to consider. So this is something that stands in stark contrast to the changes that the state made in November, yet it still remains there. Now, you could look at it from a policy standpoint and change who that person is that interacts, and you'd still be in compliance with the MIA policy.
Until you look at the athletic handbook that states specifically students and coach eligibility, chemical health, alcohol, drugs, tobacco, and then in parentheses per MIA handbook.
Yeah, you have to change that.
And I actually had mentioned this handbook to John. I think it's always important to have a handbook if you want to have one, but I think we need to do a good job of making sure that our handbook matches what our policies are, which also match what's in the student and employee handbooks. More specific to, there's something, I'm not like knocking the handbook, but more specific to the hazing and bullying policies, because I know we have far more information in our bullying policy in the student handbook, but as a standalone, there should be some reference to where people can potentially put, make a claim or report bullying, albeit if they want to do it and be known, or if they want to do it anonymously. But I think we should take some consideration into that, since it was brought to our attention tonight that even just at the school level, bullying is a problem. Students are all talking about it, it's time to do something about it.
So I would offer the suggestion that the MIAA, and I think you guys can agree with me, is a behemoth. They are a beast, and they don't like to be crossed. My fear is that if we were to somehow try to subvert their chemical health policy by saying, oh, well, it wasn't the principal that did it, it was an assistant principal. My fear is that the MIA caught wind of this, there would be repercussions for the entire athletic program. I'm not comfortable with that at all. I would be more comfortable with a coordinated effort from this committee sending a letter to the MIAA in conjunction with other school districts to say, we don't feel that this policy should be enforced to the level that it is, especially when you talk about the potential for a kid who's a potentially college-bound athlete that may end up having this injurious reputation and possibly injured recruitment efforts on the part of colleges and universities looking at them. But I think it's a slippery slope to say that we're going to subvert it. But I think the MIA should answer to it. They should answer to their policies and why their policies are enforced. And as to Patrick's point, I mean, if we are looking more towards a system of restorative justice rather than punitive justice, then they should be held to that same standard.
Bill, I think even to your point, I think that, is there a way that the MASS, I know that it's being looked at overall at all levels for the suspension rates and things along those nature, that maybe that not just with MASC, the MASS, the MARS, all of the acronym community groups, but maybe the MIA needs to be brought into that discussion as well for the equity and inclusive part of that.
I feel like we were on the same wavelength there for a second, because one of the things that was running through my mind just before you spoke was what data is known about who is most impacted by the chemical use policy or the chemical health policy. I know that the MIAA has a new director, former superintendent. I know one of the big initiatives that he has brought in this year is stopping hate in sports to try to address issues of racism in high school athletics. So I think maybe gathering some information about who's really being impacted by the chemical health policy might be a good first step to that conversation about whether, does this really make sense? Is it impacting some groups more than others? That, I think, could be quite persuasive based on the recent stances I've seen that the MIA is taking. But I have to say that I view it from sort of a higher level. It's really Steve and Steve who are sort of the front lines of this. I wonder if you have any thoughts about how this is playing out, what the scuttlebutt is about it. Are there discussions happening about this, since you're here?
I know in terms of the chemical health policy, there have been no discussions of changing or altering that. I did a little fact finding, at least within our district. There's around 50 chemical health violations throughout the whole district, the high school. 13 of them were student athletes. Of those 13 student athletes, only 4 were in-season athletes. And of the 13 total, 1 was of color, the rest were of white demographic. The second part of the chemical health policy does offer a reduced sentence for rehabilitation. So the second violation is 60%.
But I think that's key. It's the second violation.
Right.
So you lose your 25% regardless.
Correct.
So then it'll be as close to 60%, you get to 40%, which is
And that's where I agree with Bill in terms of having that open dialogue with other districts as well, reaching out and trying to advocate for that first violation with some sort of help and support. I think that's huge. I also do feel there should be some sort of consequence planning-wise as well. I'm coming from Connecticut. We had no chemical health policy there, and every district was different. Every team rule was different. So at least here there's some uniformity across the state of what the policy is everywhere. Because the MIA is very strict with that stuff, and trying to wiggle away and find loose ways around it could definitely bite us in the end.
I think a policy is only effective if people are properly reporting it, right? So there could be instances where coaches may know, I'm not speaking specific to this district, I'm saying in general, that coaches know that a student is doing something they're not supposed to, but they don't penalize them. It's a conversation of don't do that. So the MIA only knows if we report it, or if there's some testing done that requires them to see some sort of result, if I'm correct.
We don't report chemical health to the MIA. That's all handled internally. We're expected to follow that policy. And another district could challenge us. And that challenge could come playoff time.
What I would share, just from what I do know from the superintendent's level, is that is the type of thing that I've seen more in things that have got up to my level. There is correct me if I'm wrong, but I sense that there is a great deal of surveillance that teams do on each other's players' social media. And most of what I've seen has been reported by other teams, pictures or texts or whatever that could be evidence of a chemical violation. So that it's not really a matter of coaches. It's what we're getting from parents of other teams that are watching our athletes online, really.
Steve, I was just going to say, what is the MIAA reporting expectation?
We don't report chemical health to the MIA.
So is the expectation that you're supposed to from the AAs, from the MIAA's point of view?
Their expectation you comply with the policy, but it's self-policing. So
every district is allowed to increase their district policies beyond what the MIA expects, but you can't go below. So there are districts around us that the first chemical health violation is 40%, because that district has decided to have a different percentage. There are districts that have academic eligibility at you have to pass all your classes, whereas the MIA says you can fail one. So we are at the minimum of the MIA policies. The other thing I would say is the MIA policies are not a la carte. You can't, as a district, decide we're going to follow this one, we're not going to follow that one. It doesn't work that way. Lastly, I would say, Patrick, through the curriculum sub, you've been very, have had an advocacy for increasing graduation requirements, increasing. Why are we not holding student athletes to a higher level? We're going to lower that level for student athletes. And the final thing I'll say is we are using athletics now and extracurricular activities as a way to discipline behavior and change behavior that's happening during the school day. And we're not going to change that because this is one of the restorative justice practices that we've done to reduce suspensions. is to say, if you're going to be a jerk at school, you're not going to practice today. But I have a game. And you shouldn't have behaved that way in math class. Or you shouldn't have said that to that student.
But I think it goes to what Steve said, and that's that Connecticut doesn't have a policy. So if we look at it, we potentially, and I think we've seen it with our discipline rates at Wilbraham Middle School, we could disproportionately disadvantage a student from future opportunities because they made a dumb decision. And neighboring, so, and I don't know what the policy is, let's say, one town over the border in Connecticut may not have a policy, so that same student is on the field and has greater opportunities that they do not have here because of the MIAA. And so I just think that, because of the choices, I agree with that, but I think that when we look at it, we have the ability to look at things more from a rehabilitative standpoint, and I think that the chemical health policy could disproportionately disadvantage our students in this district.
So if I hear what you're saying is we have discipline data that suggests that there's a troublesome group coming up, and therefore we should lower our standards for student athletes to accommodate them so that they have more opportunity as a result of their athletics.
That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is if we look at the data at Wilbraham Middle School, I'm just using that as an example, and we use it as it pertains to C-Tech and other vocational opportunities, that there is the potential that we view things differently to what Steve said, where it could be different from any district, from any school. And so if we view discipline through one lens that is different than the way a neighbor views discipline, we potentially are disadvantaging our students. You could argue we're advantaging them as well, but we have the potential that we are negatively impacting their future opportunities. So all I'm raising it is, are we comfortable with the policy as it's written, with the focus on the changes that DESE made in November regarding suspension, expulsion, etc.? Is the time not also to look at other policies like the chemical health policy and see if we think it makes sense and what we can do? Well, you could, to Bill's point, advocate with a larger group to say, is there an opportunity here?
If the MIA changes the policy, then we would have to change.
Not necessarily, because you said we can go greater than the MIA policy.
Oh, we absolutely can go greater.
So
But I don't hear that.
So, as we run on this discussion, and it's getting late, but I just have a quick question. So the given in this argument is that schools, if you have a student athlete who is applying to college or being recruited by college, their recruitment could be negatively impacted by a disciplinary measure taken against them. Do we have any data? Do we have any type of information that would actually support that hypothesis? I ask that only because growing up, I wasn't always the best kid, and I still managed to get recruited, and I know I've had interactions with kids through the years who have had disciplinary measures taken against them, and it didn't seem to negatively impact their recruitment. I don't know how much an 8th grade suspension
Let me clarify. I was using that as an example.
No, but I'm just saying. So the question that I would ask, and I would just say I don't know how much it impacts in terms of recruitment. I mean, if you have somebody who's habitually getting in trouble, I think that's one thing. But if you have somebody who has a single offense against them or something to that effect, I think that I don't know if that would reasonably play in. Steve, what are you seeing?
So, with my experience, I fortunate enough, I played college baseball, I coached college baseball, and that was early. The landscape of recruiting has changed drastically. College coaches are very rarely, unless they have a network, they're not reaching out to the high school coach. It's very rare, unless you're an elite Division I athlete, that the coach is even coming to high school events to watch now. It's all watered down in the summertime with travel, AAU. That's where they're going to see the recruits. That's what they're going to see. In terms of the chemical health stuff with the kids out, and honestly, from my point of view as a coach, it could separate me to Steve if I'm sitting and I'm looking for a kid, because at the end of the day, college coaches are looking for top quality kids. And like you said, if it's one incident, that's all right, but if it's multiple incidents, that's where the recruiting negatively impacts. But one time, that doesn't, in my experience recruiting kids, doesn't negatively impact the recruiting process. I think but the landscape's very different in terms of recruiting high school kids. That's kind of, to me, I don't see it as a negative impact if the kid is suspended once for a chemical health violation in the recruiting process.
I seem to think that and I don't mean to speak for you, Patrick, but the point was more, the way I was understanding it was how equitable it is to some students to just ineffectively be ruled out because of one mistake that they make. And again, actions have consequences. I'm the first person to tell you, you make a poor choice, the action has a consequence. But I guess depending on how we're looking at that because of the suspension rates that we're seeing, I think there was some conversation of if the chemical policy is you lose out the first year and then they'll offer assistance the second year, it kind of defeats the purpose, right? So if somebody does something the first year, yes, you can sit out a game or two, but it's like, should that affect your whole entire season? I mean, and again, it comes down to the seriousness of it. But part of their policy as well is you could be near. So like you could just be in the right place at the wrong time. It says it, I just read it. So if as long as you're near it.
No, it explicitly says you're not guilty by association. So I think the advocacy, if the committee wants to take on this issue, is through the MIAA. We have to follow the policy as is, and we put every athlete at risk and every team at risk by not following the policy. The idea of the principal confirming is simply that the assistant principals do the investigation. They come to me and say, we caught Steve with a vape. I said, okay. And then it goes to the athletic director to see if that student is a student athlete. So to say like we're gonna change our policy so somebody else investigates, therefore it doesn't fall in it, that's not gonna work. It's not gonna fly.
I do think, Steve, to the point you made earlier, though, in season doesn't matter, correct? I thought it's your subsequent season. So if you're not in season, so and you made a reference, I think it was 13 were athletes, however many were in. I thought that if it occurs in the winter and you're a spring athlete, you would lose 25% of your next season.
Yes. To me, in my point, in terms of making right and wrong decisions, our in-season athletes, in my mind, are more responsible when they're in season than out of season, not understanding the decisions you make out of season still impact the season that you're looking to participate in.
So nothing needs to occur. It was just raising it. I tend to think kids are going to have the potential to be negatively impacted depending upon how we view something, because all that has to occur is you have to comply with the policy. However, maybe there's a greater reporting rate of one community than another. To the point of these, maybe there are people on social media saying, okay, we're going to go after it. So I just think it's a policy that's ripe for abuse, and it doesn't appear, one person's opinion, to really focus on rehabilitative or restorative. It's 100% punitive until the second offense, when it becomes a portion of it can be rehabilitative or restorative. That's all. But why don't we move on?
Consent agenda.
Make a motion to accept the consent agenda.
Second.
Questions or discussion? Thank you. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, Steve.
Okay, motion carries 7-0.
Thank you, Steve Squared.
Okay, so we will move on to the superintendent's update.
Thank you. I want to begin by thanking Jimmy Bissonette, who did the research and purchasing of our new mics tonight, when I think a lot of things are coming to fruition. One of the goals of the strategic plan for this year was the equity audit, which obviously we began with. Another one was to improve our online presence. I think between the YouTube channel, all the great work Dave is doing, and the microphones, I think we're now there. I really do. So thank you, Jimmy. Also, I just want to let everyone know that work continues on the district website. We have a new drop of many assets from graduation. So So we were all there. We may be on the new website. We'll see. And then I would just close for the public by also acknowledging the teachers that we, or all the staff, I should say, that we acknowledged at retirement just before this meeting. So those retirees this year were John Jijic, Beth Sebula, Lee McKay, Susan Jones, Lisa Person, Kiera Fryer, Tracy Sugarmeyer, Christopher Egan, Ed Senandela, Deborah Joy, Janet Shea, Catherine Van Dolson, Deborah Oken, Linda Kern, and Christine Bach, who collectively had 315 years of service to the district. Thank you for all you've done.
So future agenda items, in addition to what do we value, transportation, mobile education look like in 5 years, athletic fees, is there anything else anyone would like to add in?
I would just do fees in general.
I would do the booster club, so we all received an email a few weeks back from a graduate. I think it'd be a great opportunity for that to be brought forward as an agenda item.
So now we will discuss meeting dates. Are people willing to meet next week? I know Bill is unavailable.
What day?
Or the next. Or
There's 2 weeks left.
So
There's
really
2
before the end
weeks.
of June, so maybe the following week.
I think the week was the week of the 29th, I think you said.
I leave Wednesday, next Wednesday morning.
The 21st?
21st.
Are people available the 29th?
Yes, I am.
I mean, I could make myself available, maybe. Patrick, I'll pick you up.
I'm only available the 26th that week.
You available the 26th? Or the
That's a Monday.
I can do the 26th.
Can you do the 26th? Sorry, I didn't do that.
When you come back to here.
Can I go?
Unless there's a baseball champion.
It works.
Sure.
I missed so many of those games.
As many as I can make.
You only get them so many years.
Yeah. And they're doing really well this year. Undefeated.
Good for them. So the 26th?
Good.
Maybe 26th? Is this going to be like a short meeting, or is it going to be a long meeting? Sure. Can I vote that there's no executive session? Sure. Sure.
At that meeting or today?
No, at that meeting.
So when did we decide on the 26th?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm looking for good review. I know Bill's out. Cheryl, you're okay with that?
Yep, I'm okay. And what,
6 o'clock?
6 o'clock?
Can I do it earlier? Can we do earlier? Anybody can do earlier?
I can do earlier.
Or, listen, it's Monday, I don't leave work, I'm early.
5. Let's see 5 o'clock.
Are you okay with that, John? And Erin?
Yeah, that's fine.
I mean, I figure earlier is better. The 26th.
The 26th, from 5 to 6.
Yes.
Thank you. Yes.
I want to talk about July too. I think it's the 13th, is that?
Yeah, so then we have our reorganization meeting.
So you might want to skip that 4th of July week.
Yeah, so the 13th.
And that is
But now-
I'm actually off the 4th of July weekend around, so if you guys want to do it then.
I'm available on the 6th, but I'm not available on the 13th.
Okay.
I'm not available on the 13th.
Okay. Right, right, exactly.
What's your schedule?
It doesn't happen, so just.
What about the 20th?
No, not next Monday, I mean in July.
How about July 20th? Lisa, Bill, Cheryl?
She's
July 20th?
Next week, I'm here.
How about July 20th?
We already have a meeting scheduled on that day.
Well, so I think technically it's in there, but it's not technically supposed to be in there.
July 20th.
It's in schedule.
I would attempt to remote.
Okay.
No, actually it is because, yeah, we're supposed to have it in the first week and then the third week, and the third week it's the 20th.
But it's because we reorganized, we just confirmed that that's like, don't we decide on whether Thursdays work and if we're still in the
Oh, yeah,
meeting
yeah.
schedule to just
You can always change the night of the meetings, you guys.
Just want to make sure that people are available, just because it's summer. Okay, so we will make the next meeting July 20th, the reorganization meeting. So we have June 26th at 5 o'clock in the IRC, and then the reorganization meeting will be July 20th.
John, when you do the July 20th meeting, before they have to vote, because you have to open that meeting, they'll have to vote, everybody will have to vote because it's remote, just as a reminder. Okay. Even if you call in and someone has you on a phone by a microphone, that still works. It's just the idea is when one person is remote, everybody has to vote, so everybody knows who's voting and how it's voting.
And what time did we say on the 20th?
Do you want to change it, Mike? Is it different?
Does 6:30 on 7/20 work?
Oh,
I just don't know if it's gonna work.
right.
It's a time difference too.
Which helps, because everyone else will be back, so.
About the 27th, still on the other side of the ocean yet?
No.
Gives you guys a couple of weeks to vacay before you have to get back into this one.
Okay, 27th. Rich, is that okay for you?
I'm here on the 20th, 27th, the probably most.
Okay.
Why don't we stick with the 20th?
Either way, you're going to have someone remote, so.
Right. And by the way, the planning committee that we're on, we can continue meeting because that stays, correct?
Actually, the 27th, I
Okay.
can stay another extra day here. I'm here the 27th.
Ooh,
You'll be here the 27th?
I'll be here the 27th.
Okay, 27, 6:30
Instead of the
IRC.
20th.
Yes. And are you going to be in person?
July 27th, 6:30 IRC. So we do have the need for executive session pursuant to Mass General Law,
What time?
Chapter 30A, Section
6:30.
21A, to conduct strategy sessions in preparation for negotiations with non-union personnel and/or to conduct negotiations with non-union personnel, FY24 wage adjustments. We will not, correct, we will be adjourning from regular session.
So moved.
I say won't be.
Second. Third.
All right, roll call vote.
Yes.
Bill, Sharon, Sean.
I had the wrong.
Aye.
I won't be here on the 27th. I'm here the 27th of June, not the 27th of July. I will be here the 20th, but I can do remote on the 27th, so. sorry.
We'll recap and we'll fix it later.
You can fix it next week.
Patrick?
Aye.
Lisa?
Yes.
Maura?
Yes.
Myself, I, we're adjourning to executive session. We will not be returning to regular session. Thank you.